If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
What weird, spooky, or high-strangeness experience have you heard about or encountered yourself that still baffles you to this day?
Let's be real for a second. We've all heard the "I saw a light in the sky" stories. They're everywhere. But what I'm after is something deeper and something that dances on the line between absolutely absurd and mind-blowingly real. Let me give you an example. I stumbled upon this online group dedicated to UFOs and other mysteries. Pretty standard stuff, right? But then, this woman drops a bombshell in the comments. She claims she visited her cousin in Las Vegas, not because she loves the glitz and glamour. She actually said she hates Vegas, but because her cousin, a casino director with connections, promised to take her to Area 51. Now, here's where it gets wild. She says she was shown what they could show her. She didn't see everything, of course, but they took her 3 levels underground. And while she didn't find what she was hoping for, she swears the experience was fascinating. If that wasn't enough, someone else chimed in. I've seen things too, in Russia of all places. Let's talk. Are these stories just tall tales? Could they be fragments of truth hidden in the noise? I don't know, but I want to find out. This is your space. Tell me a story so bizarre, so jaw-droppingly strange, that even your best friends roll their eyes when you mention it. I'm not asking for proof, though if you've got it, let's see it. I'm asking for the kind of stories that you've kept to yourself because no one would believe me anyway. This isn't about judgment. It's about curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, uncovering connections we didn't know existed. Let's hear it. I was having a party with my friends in a small cabin when we were 17. I passed out on a bed, and my best mate crashed beside me. In the middle of the night I woke up when the friend was above me, shaking me by my shoulders and saying firmly, "Hey buddy, the situation is serious, you need to wake up." As I opened my eyes, the whole cabin was on fire, and I could only see smoke, flames, and a window. Instinct kicked in, and I ran through the flames and jumped headfirst through the window. The friend who woke me up didn't make it out. The next day during the police interview, I explained what happened, but they seemed confused. The police reported that they found the friend under the bed, never having woken up. The friend had probably rolled off that shabby bed and ended up underneath it. I know it wasn't him physically waking me up, but the memory of it is somehow one of the strongest I have, whatever it was. I think there's something in my house's forest. For context, I recently moved to a new place with my family. The house is in the countryside, and the property is very close to an abandoned forest, which I used to visit almost daily in my spare time until 1 month ago, when I had to stop going for some time. 3 days ago, I was finally able to go out again, and unusual phenomena began to occur. On the first day, after being some time in there, I decided to go, and on my way to the exit, I heard my dad's voice coming from the forest, calling my name. At first I thought it was extremely weird, because there was no reason for him to be there, and then 2 minutes after he called me and told me to go back to the house since dinner was ready. I freaked out, but I thought I might just have hallucinated that and forgot about it for the day. On the second day, when I returned to that location and stood at a specific stop, I heard the sound of a flute nearby. Like the previous day, I assumed it was just a coincidence and that someone might have been playing the flute there. However, after walking for several minutes, I couldn't find anyone around, even though I felt as if I could see someone's shadow out of the corner of my left eye. Today, while walking around, I accidentally stepped on a thorny branch, which pierced one of my fingers and caused it to bleed non-stop. I couldn't sit there and take care of it properly, so I did the best I could to get out of there and go to my house. It hurt a lot, but strangely when I got home, my finger was completely fine and didn't hurt at all anymore. Every time I go there, I feel a strange aura, like I shouldn't be there or like something doesn't want me in there. I even got weird dreams about the place and some sleep paralysis lately. Maybe it's just paranoia, but do you think there's actually something weird in there? I saw a floating ball of light in the distance while camping in the forest at night. It floated towards me, bobbing in between the trees, and then it hovered in front of me for a moment. I felt the greatest fear of my life, real terror. I said, "Hello?" And then my vision of the world sort of unfurled, or I saw the mathematics of it all. I can't quite describe it. I definitely wasn't dreaming, as I was sitting smoking a cigarette when it happened and immediately packed up camp and ran home afterwards. What most troubles me about this situation is that I can't adequately describe it or feel certain about it. I am constantly questioning what actually happened that night, what my now fuzzy memory of it was, and whether it was an acid flashback or a moment of madness. I believe it was meant to be that way. I went camping often, just wanting to stargaze and think about the unknown, hoping there was something more to this life. My experience is quite funny, as my scariest experience was when I was in 6th grade in my countryside house. It was located in a rural area, surrounded with farmland and greenery. Something that was like gold for an urban kid like me. I was the one who would like to explore around forests or abandoned city buildings, something that's called urbex these days. My dad would share creepy stories from his childhood, including tales of the Wendigo. One night after dinner, I went out for a walk, and I spotted something whitish below a giant tree. The source of light was the moonlight. I went ahead to inspect what that white thing was. It was actually a dog's skull. I instantly thought of a Wendigo, as they wear deer skulls. I was scared more when I noticed the dog's entire skeleton lying on the ground. As soon as I noticed it, I heard a dog bark at me, which made my heart skip a beat, especially in a place with a lack of light. I sprinted my way home, crying. After I took some time to calm down and explain my story to my parents and relatives, I thought it might be paranormal or that I had spotted a Wendigo. They laughed at me and said that it was a dead dog and I had interfered with their personal space. Odd Christmas Day encounter. I am uncertain about the nature of the encounter I had, but it involved another being. When I was about 7, I was spending Christmas Day at my auntie and uncle's house in an area of Victoria, Australia, called Spring Gully. My cousins had brought their little dog Bud with them for the day, and in the arvo after lunch I decided to take him for a walk to the pony club that was nearby. The area they lived in is surrounded by forest/bushland, and the pony club was situated at the start of a really foresty bit of land. The riding trails went off into the bush. Bud was a sweet little dog who I had never seen become aggressive ever. He had lived in both country and city houses, so he was used to animals/people. We started to walk across this open paddock at the pony club towards one of the riding trails when I suddenly had this weird feeling of being watched. It was so intense and like nothing I had ever felt before. I slowed my walking, and when we got about 3 meters from the start of the bushland, Bud stopped dead in his tracks and refused to move. His little paws were digging into the dirt, and he just looked terrified. Then one of the bushes in front of us started to move. Aussie bushland can be really dense, and often you can't see through low scrub, and Bud went nuts. He was baring his teeth and snarling and barking like crazy. I was so terrified I stopped and couldn't move. Whatever was making the bush move couldn't have been any taller than me, and I swear I heard a faint weird clicking noise. Then suddenly it ran off further into the bush and was seemingly gone. Because we were near the bush, I thought maybe it was just a kangaroo. They are everywhere, but when it left, it definitely sounded like something running, not hopping, and roos make a very distinctive hopping sound. It was also a very fast run, not very human. After the unknown creature left, Bud began to run back to the house, so I followed him. Dogs were barking around us as we returned home, and I had this awful feeling in the pit of my stomach. When we got back, Bud was back to normal. I didn't tell anyone because I thought they would have just told me it was a person in the bush and probably wouldn't have let me go back again, so I kept my mouth shut. The funny thing is I now live in that same area 20 years later, and I still get a weird feeling of being watched when I walk in the bush. My boyfriend has also heard a weird noise at night coming from the forest, which he described as sounding like a theremin. I'm curious as to whether anyone else here who is from Australia has had a similar experience. An unexplainable strange thing happened. I and my friend, we'll call her B, were in the car on our way to pick up our other friend, let's call her F. Earlier in the day F was on the phone saying that her nail broke and she couldn't find it, and she was bummed because she had recently gotten them done. I get into the car with B to go pick up F, and we find on the passenger seat the nail she had lost. We knew it was hers because it had a very specific design she came up with, and she was in my passenger seat the day earlier. We thought, cool, we'll pick her up, and we'll give her the nail back, she'll be pleased. We arrive at her house, and she enters the car. She says all happy, look, guys, I found my missing nail under the bed, and proceeds to show her nail fully intact. I and B look at each other extremely puzzled. We told her the whole thing, and she was freaked out. She had never gotten this design before, so it couldn't be a nail she had lost another time, and it was a very specific flower composition with specific colors she had gotten for her birthday that is coming up. To make the thing even worse, both nails, the one we found and the one under the bed, had the same exact dent that's usually caused by a nail falling off, in the same place. The thing is my friend is very nervous right now. It seems to me she's experiencing derealization, which is horrible, and M and F are also a bit weirded out by it. F did indeed suggest it was the simulation glitching, but I don't know. I'm a spiritual person, but I've never pondered the idea of the world being a simulation. We even told our moms, and they're freaked out, they couldn't believe it. We have given F the other nail, but I think it was a bad idea, as she keeps analyzing it and spiraling. Anyway, We thought of sharing this here to hear if this happened to someone else too and if someone has any thoughts on this. I'm 33 and female. Here's my story, which happened about 2 years ago. I woke up in the middle of the night because one of our puppies was throwing up near my bed. I sat upright, attended to the puppy, who was still vomiting, and observed that my sister was seated on her bed, close to mine. She was awake as well. I asked her to help me clean up the mess. She just looked at me, not saying anything. I started checking on our puppy, reassuring him. I again told my sister to help me clean up and to grab some toilet paper in the bathroom. No response. I looked at her then, and she was still just staring back at me. When our puppy stopped throwing up, my sister still didn't move and didn't say anything. Irritated, I snapped at her and said, "Never mind. I'll do it." I headed for the bathroom, walking past her as I did. I got the toilet paper and started cleaning up the mess. The puppy went back to sleeping. My sister was no longer there. I wondered where she went. I stepped out of our room, thinking she was probably in the small area just outside our room, a space where we usually hang out. I went there to check and saw that it was empty. I figured she probably went somewhere outside but will be back soon. So I returned to our room and went back to bed. I was drifting off to sleep when I remembered something. My sister worked today, and she was on the night shift. This meant she was in the office this whole time. Panicking, I grabbed my mobile phone and called her. No answer. I sent her a text message and told her to call me ASAP. I needed to know if she really was in the office. A minute or two later, she called. Yes, she was in the office. She was there since 9:30 p.m. It was nearing 3 a.m. when that strange incident happened. I really thought that the being I saw sitting on my sister's bed was her. I mean, I can even recall the clothes she was wearing. When I called her attention, she even turned her head and looked at me. The only weird thing that I could register at that moment was the blank expression on her face. I'm new here, so that's good for me since I don't want people to know I share here. I will not give a full picture of the town. But it's in southeastern Europe. Weekend, cloudy, and I'm on the regular bus with a girl. Suddenly, a very loud bang rocks the bus, and a very intense flash fills it. The noise was like those buses that have metal rods on wires, trolleybuses, I think they're called. Except this was in the late afternoon, around 5 to 6 p.m. local time. We were scared shitless. But the absurd part is the following. The flash lasted for like a second or two, but when it ended, the bus continued regularly like nothing happened. The passengers seemed unfazed, like they didn't even notice. In fact, I know they didn't because my girl and I were commenting, like, WTF happened? Is everyone okay? And the people were looking at us like we fell on our heads. It's almost like something glitched in the Matrix and we had a reality reboot. No time was lost, I think. We were too dumbfounded to check, but the rest of the ride was okay. This was in broad daylight, both of us sober, no drugs of any kind, etc., not worn out, dehydrated, or any other disorder one can think of. We do not have epilepsy or anything similar. It's a situation straight out of the X-Files, I suppose. Something in the woods, should I be worried? I live in central New York, and there's a large water reservoir in the woods near my house. It has a mix of small, paved roadways and dirt paths for monthly maintenance and water sampling that I use as a walking trail. I normally go early in the day with my headphones and music on. Over the past 3 days, I have gone out at dusk and forgotten to bring my headphones. Along the paved section of the path, there was a strange stone setting in the middle of the paved path that doesn't match anything that I've seen out there before. It was so out of place I noticed it from the bottom of the path and ended up deciding to take it for my collection. Shortly after it began to feel as though I was being watched, so I decided to head back. There was something in the dark, thicker patch of trees that followed along the path that sounded like it was keeping pace with me. When I stopped, it would stop shortly after. It was too dark to see through the trees where the noise was coming from. There was a point toward the end of the trail where I spotted some bats and decided I had to stop to get a picture. Zero survival instinct. Whatever was following me stopped, and I thought maybe I was just hearing things. But 15 minutes later I started walking again, and the noise started too and ended as soon as I hit the road away from the trees. The next day I talked to a few coworkers who had been up there a few years earlier. They said their kids would often tell them about hearing footsteps in the trees and like something was watching them. And I had a repeat encounter the next night as well, but only for part of the trail, not the full stretch like the first time. Any idea what this could be? Should I be worried it's dangerous? My mom, I, and a few other people in town have spotted a cryptid about 15 minutes down the road by the river. This area is separated from the woods by a major county road and a small cul-de-sac. People speculate about lives in the caves along the river. It was a strange, extremely tall white creature with strange bent legs like a dog would have and an almost canine-looking face. I'm not sure if it's related or not. Ghost car experience. Very odd, luckily my wife experienced it with me as well. I've always wanted to believe, and I could say I've had 1 to 2 weird experiences. Unfortunately, it was when I was younger, grade school/middle school. With that said, about 2 months ago, my wife and I had a very strange experience, and we have come to terms with it. We experienced something not quite right. We live on an island where, unfortunately, car crashes and deaths due to them are very common. The population and amount of car crashes are super disproportionate. The wife and I both work in hospitality, and we tend to get off around midnight, sometimes a little later, 1 to 2 a.m. I finished work somewhat earlier than my wife, so I walked to her workplace, waited for her, and noticed that she seemed a bit tired. Therefore, I decided to drive us home. To clarify, we were both completely sober at that time. She had only half a glass of wine, and I had not consumed any alcohol that day. I decided to take the scenic route home, which involves driving through 2 roads along the coast of the island, although this is less significant at 2 a.m. when it's dark. Remember, this is a small island, it's only 1 lane each way. I'm driving, and I'm talking to my wife about our day. As we are reaching town, we catch up to a car, probably going slower than we were, but still maintain a decent distance. Let's say 10 to 15 meters. I'm not in a rush, so I can just keep a steady pace and relatively the same distance consistently. Well, at a distance, we see the all too well-known blue and red lights of a cop car parked diagonally, basically blocking almost both lanes but completely covering the lane we're in. We think it might be either construction work or an accident. Here's the part that scared the hell out of us. The car is still ahead of us, and the driver appears to be maneuvering around the parked cop car. Then I just assume it must be road work, hence why the car was able to pass around the cop car. I am maintaining a decent speed as I approach the cop car, preparing to go around it and possibly observe any ongoing construction. I have to slam on the brakes. Like slam them. And both my wife and I look at each other, and almost in sync, we say, WTF? There was no pass. Yes, the cop car almost blocked both lanes, and the rest was blocked by the familiar yellow caution tape. There was absolutely no pass, and there had been a car crash. The car was flipped a little ahead of the cop car, and they were picking up pieces with a shovel. I can still hear the noise of the shovel against the road/concrete and glass. Here's the crazy part, we had to reverse and turn around. There was no space to do a U-turn or basically go anywhere. The car in front of us completely disappeared. We corroborated what we saw, and we both saw that car in front of us for a few minutes before it disappeared in front of the cop car. There's nowhere it could have gone. I'm just happy my wife saw it. I feel less crazy. And to this day we can't explain it. I live in a fairly rural area, and with 2 dogs, I'm often out walking them in the dark, especially this time of year when there's no other option. I'm a pretty rational woman, but there are a few places on my usual walks that seriously give me the willies. I catch glimpses of movement among the dense, dark trees with a derelict cottage and along the path beside the woods, where the trees make weird snapping and cracking noises in the wind, and I feel like I'm being watched from the darkness. Gives me serious goosebumps and triggers the runaway response even if I know it's just shadows and deer. I'm always grounded by both my dogs, who don't react to the creepy feelings at all and just bimble about sniffing, playing, and generally not giving a shit. That reassures me it's my imagination running away from me, and I'm able to ignore it. Except once when I was walking on a wooded path and heard a high-pitched cry coming from the clearing in the trees up ahead. Dogs were doing their thing, so I carried on ignoring the noise until I heard it again, this time followed by what sounded like a heavy knocking and a metallic crack. This time the dogs stopped dead in their tracks, staring towards the noises, and both started to growl. That's when this mournful moaning started, a long, desolate sound, followed by a weird cackling laugh that immediately triggered that run the duck away feeling. You can imagine how I felt right then, a lone woman standing in the dark among the trees, wind blowing and ominous demonic noises coming from up ahead, exactly where I had to go if I wanted to get home. The dogs were seriously unhappy now, growling loudly and moving to stand protectively on either side of me. I'm standing still, listening to what I'm now imagining to be some kind of demonic Bigfoot, and desperately trying to remember what Dean Winchester would do in a situation like this. The noises up ahead are louder, and I've got my dogs back on their leads. Neither of them seem to be keen to move forward, and I'm shitting myself. With no other choice, we slowly walk to the edge of the clearing and catch sight of a car with 2 shadowy figures in the gloom. Except instead of a demonic presence tormenting the poor driver, it's a couple leaning against the car and very definitely enjoying themselves. The moaning, laughter, knocking, and metallic noises suddenly transform from creepy to something else entirely. That is how I genuinely found out one of my favorite dog walking routes was also a popular dogging spot. I've been hearing weird noises around my house lately. I currently live with my wife, and my sister is our roommate so we can afford the mortgage and she has somewhere to stay. Either way, I like to go for walks at night. It's cooler, there's no one else out, and I can just vibe and walk for however long I want, up and down the street running into our suburb. Usually I walk with headphones in, jamming to music. But I'm not really doing that lately. This is all going to sound crazy, so please bear with me. I'm being serious. I've been hearing weird noises coming from the woods around our suburb for a few nights now. It started one night, maybe 5 nights ago, when I was finishing up a walk and sitting on a bench on our front porch, recouping. I heard, chittering or laughter. It sounded like it was coming from above me and nearby. It sounded like a series of high-hee-hee laughs, each accompanied by a clicking sound. I'm pretty not dumb, so I was like, duck no, and went inside, and that was my night. Then the next night I went for another walk. I don't know what kind of demons were out the previous night, but I was so sure I'd be fine. But just in case, I took my dog with me, and my wife tagged along too. We got to the end of the suburb, where the last lamplight is broken so it's really dark, and where the suburb street links with a country road. Well, out in the darkness, my dog spotted something. I mean full laser focus, locked on target kind of behavior. Then my wife saw an outline of something, and it freaked her out real bad. She was like, "Babe, what the duck is that?" Then I saw it. I still have no idea what I was looking at. Some kind of animal, maybe, but not a deer for sure. It had thin legs, but something about its head and body seemed off. And the way it skittered off while staring at us freaked us out so bad that we turned around and left. Our dog was so locked onto it that we were basically dragging her home. Now last night, I heard weird screaming in the woods. I posted the video online, and people were saying things from fox to water pipe release to more joke responses like Wendigo and zombies. But I'm telling you, things are getting really weird around here. I dunno, maybe it was a fox screaming last night. A weird thing about this place is, sometimes at night, you'll hear rapid-fire gunshots from the farmers nearby. I have no idea what they're shooting at, but they're definitely either rifles and or pistols. Every once in a while I hear a shotgun. Occasionally many cops come out. And sometimes I get deeply disquieting feelings walking around at night. So does my sister. Sometimes I just turn around and nope at home after a point. My house is on the border of the under construction and completed areas of the subdivision. At night, around 11 p.m. to midnight, when no one else is around, I hear rummaging in the empty houses that are still under construction. No cars or workers out, just me and whatever is sorting through the houses. I really hate it for some reason. And finally, the weirdest thing of all is what I call the demon house. In this neighborhood, houses are getting snatched up fast. As soon as one is done, it's basically sold. Some houses are sold before they are even finished. All of them except one, which I call the demon house. This house has remained empty for a year since the previous owners moved out in what appeared to be a hurry. It has changed owners several times, but it still will not sell. Not sell. When I walk past it, I can see in the window above the door that there is one light inside, some kind of ambient overhead light. I started calling it the demon house because it was so spooky at night. However, one night as I passed by, I noticed that the light was off. Instead it looked like there was a dim night light or something facing or near the door. Tell me why, tell me how a ducking shadow moved in front of it. Like a big boy. The light was there, then it was not, and then it was back. Like something or someone was in the house and moved in front of it. I noped it inside then too. At this point I'm thoroughly freaked out. But I'm also deeply intrigued. I live near an ancient church, and I'm thinking that should be my spot to check out first, but I'm not sure how badly I want to talk to a rural pastor in the deep south. Still, I want to see if I can find anything intriguing there or perhaps speak to someone about it. If not, I'm thinking I'm going to try to peer into the demon house. I might need a ladder for that, though, and all the doors have Ring cameras. I don't know. What do you guys think? What would you do? Mount Shasta trip report, full body apparitions, weird lights, no humanoid encounters, the place is a high-strangeness gold mine. We recently returned from Mount Shasta, a breathtakingly beautiful place. It is steeped in mystery, and the sky is just next level amazing for stargazing. This is what we ran into on this adventure. Bright light orbs that looked like part of constellations, except that stars don't move and blink out. Daytime apparitions are as solid as humans, but not. The mountainside was illuminated by strange lights. I haven't been able to capture any of the night shots of the weird lights. I saw so many that I don't know where to start. There were lights like stars, which seemed to move and blink out. It was pointless to capture such images on a cell phone, so I didn't even try. I watched object-like things disappear behind the mountain, but they moved so quickly that there was no way to identify what they were. The mountain on the side had lights we all saw, and they were so bright they reflected on Lake Siskiyou with their brightness. They were in an area that should have been void of humans. I suppose there were people up on the mountain hiking at 11:30 with super powerful flashlights. However, I think that improbable. Maybe a natural phenomenon, maybe something more. I can't say anything other than I saw the lights. Lastly, the apparition. This one took me by complete surprise. I was in the lead bike riding around Lake Siskiyou with my wife and kid. We are coming up to a pedestrian bridge on the bikes. I am up front, and I pause to adjust my phone on my handlebars and see a person with a blue shirt on and dark hair up around the bend. Being a pandemic, we are cautious of being near anyone. So, I am waiting a second for the kid and wife to catch up. I warn them there is someone on the bridge ahead, so be careful. As I come around the corner, I see that there is no one present, no place to go down, and no person on the bridge, just emptiness. Although it is extremely unlikely, I suppose it could have been someone wearing repellent ropes who leapt over the side without our knowledge. That was extremely unexpected. I've never seen anything that was daytime, but there it was. I looked up deaths in the area and found nothing, so oh well, moving on, I saw it, and that is all I can say. That is my trip report on Mount Shasta, a trip I have been wanting to do for years. I highly recommend going there and creating some amazing memories. Possible alien encounter? This actually happened to me back in 2004, but I still dream about it every so often. I had another dream last night, so I decided to share here, hoping that maybe someone else has had a similar encounter, or maybe someone can convince me that I was actually dreaming the encounter itself. I was pregnant with my son in the winter of 2003 to 2004, and this happened when I was around 8 months, just weeks away from my due date. His dad and I were sleeping in our bed, and the room setup was that he was sleeping on my right, and on my left was our closet door and a large picture window looking out onto an empty field. An extremely bright, brilliant white light, shining around the edges of the curtains in the bedroom, woke me up. The field was without any roads, and no houses were visible from our window. Only an ATV could be driving in it, and it was winter in the middle of the night, so I was going to get up and look outside when I realized I couldn't move. Before I even had time to panic, the closet door opened and what could only be a gray alien stepped out. It looked pretty close to the same description except that it was well over 6 feet in height. My BF is 6 feet 3 inches, and I had seen him walk in front of that window countless times, so I can safely estimate that this thing was approximately 6.5 feet tall. It didn't seem to be wearing any clothes but didn't exactly look naked either, as if it maybe was wearing a jumpsuit that perfectly matched its skin color and texture. It had a large bald head and enormous black eyes. I clearly remember seeing the light from outside reflected in its eyes. I was terrified as I was lying there in bed while it approached, trying to move or scream, but I was completely paralyzed. It came up to the side of the bed and reached to touch my pregnant stomach, first pulling up my pajama shirt and then laying its hand flat over my belly. It had abnormally long, thin fingers, and its skin was cool and rubbery feeling, not like human flesh at all. The second it touched me, my fear was gone, and I was perfectly calm while we stared at each other. That's the last thing I recall before waking up in the morning. I immediately remembered what happened as soon as I opened my eyes, and my fear came back, but I was prepared to believe it was a vivid dream. This changed when I spoke to my boyfriend that morning. He was in our bathroom brushing his teeth, and when I went in there to pee, the first thing he asked me was if I saw that bright light outside in the field last night. My blood ran cold, and I couldn't say anything for a minute before I freaked out a little and told him about what I thought was a dream. He said he briefly woke up to see the light but never saw anything else unusual. But when he went to open the closet, he stopped and sniffed and then asked me to come smell. I went over there, and the air in the closet had a weird ozone-like smell, kind of similar to the way the air smells right before a summer thunderstorm but much stronger. He ended up shrugging it off, but I wondered again about my dream. I'm still unsure whether or not the incident actually happened. I can't really explain the light that we both saw or the strange odor that we both smelled. Maybe for some reason there were people out in the field with a bright light, and my half-asleep mind just created a scary dream, but that still doesn't explain the strong smell in the closet. It went away soon after and never smelled like that again in the entire time we lived there. I'm not prepared to swear that the experience was an actual encounter, but I can't quite convince myself that it wasn't either. I can still clearly recall everything from that night. It's never again happened to me, though, thankfully. I'll probably never know if it was an extremely vivid dream or something else. I've had lots of weird experiences, but the most recent one tops the others. I have written it down in a journal so I don't think about it because it makes me feel physically sick and paranoid thinking about it, but here's another. When I was a teenager living with my parents, my bedroom was in the basement at the end of a long hallway with a bathroom to my right and, at the other end of the hall, a storage closet under the stairs. Now at this time I had 2 dogs that were half husky, half wolf, so big duckers, and I had one of them sleeping in my room this night, and he was about 200 pounds easy. I always felt safe with him around. So I woke up one night to go use the washroom. There was a faint bit of light in my room from outside. I got up, and my dog got up with me. Since my bathroom is close, I can navigate there without turning any lights on, but when I open my bedroom door, I freeze as I can see something at the other end of the hallway. Now everything was pitch black in the hall, but this thing was darker than black, and from what I could make out, it looked like a person crouched over. My dog came up beside me and started growling, and I could see all the hair on his neck and back standing up. Then, I shit you not, whatever it was moved and looked at us, and my dog started whimpering and hid under my bed. This thing then started coming closer, so I shut the door and lay awake in bed until morning. Nothing else happened that night. I've got many stories from that house, but that was the most extreme. I was door dashing some food to a customer who lived way back in the woods. I might add that I live in East Tennessee, so I'm in the Appalachia area. It was around 7 p.m. when I passed this small trailer on the left side of the road. Nothing fancy, a heavy-set woman on the porch, a tall man in a long-sleeved white shirt and some blue overalls, and a child in a diaper walking around the end of the driveway by the street. The trailer was white with red shutters and a red-covered porch. I passed and waved, then got to the customer's house and delivered the food. On my way back I wanted to see if the man was still in the driveway. But when I passed, the trailer was gone, just thick underbrush in its place. I thought I had not yet gotten to where it was, so I kept looking, but it was gone. I thought about turning around and seeing if it would be there again, but I decided that wasn't a good idea. As I passed the area where the trailer should have been, everything went quiet. I had my window down and heard nothing. I felt a strange sense that something weird was happening. Thoughts? I went through a period of time about 15 years ago, when I saw/felt/heard supernatural things frequently. I'll try and describe them. I was in my bedroom, sitting on my bed with one of my cats on my lap and the other on the floor at the opposite end of the room. I glanced up and saw a thing, an apparition or smudge of light reflected on my television screen, and both of my cats were looking toward the center of the room, where that reflection would have been, if that makes sense. A few weeks after that I woke in the night and saw 3 perfect orbs of light just hovering above my bedroom door. I was awake quite late. Everybody else was asleep, my dogs were all downstairs, and my cats were both in my bedroom. I heard our loose floorboard on the stairs creak, and a few seconds later a hand waved through the gap between my open door and the wall. I woke up one night, and I could feel somebody pushing my body against the bed. They let go eventually, then I walked to the bathroom, and I was just aware of something watching me from above my door. Like I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. The next day my mom told me she had felt and experienced the exact same thing before I had told her about my experience. I woke up in the night and heard a voice whispering in my ear, "It was you, wasn't it?" And one time I was walking my dogs along a farm lane. It was getting late and dark. I walked through a strange pocket of cold air, and I could physically feel a rope against my legs, like it had been tied across the road. My aunt used to work nights at a nursing home. One night she was doing paperwork at the desk. She saw this arm come out of nowhere and poke her, as if to get her attention. She thought it was one of the residents. She ignored it at first, then said, "Go back to sleep, it's nighttime." Then the arm poked her really hard, and she turned to look at the person. She realized there was no one actually there and it was just an arm that had materialized. This same aunt was also on her way to work in the middle of the night. On the interstate, there was a car driving erratically. She slowed down to let them get by her, and this car swerved to be right in front of her truck. She said that an alien-looking being in the driver's seat turned and stared back at her. Her lights were right on this thing, and she saw it clearly. I asked her if it was just some weirdo in a Halloween mask. She said no, it was clearly the face of the creature. My great-aunt and her husband were visiting her parents in their old farmhouse outside of Leopold, Missouri. I'm unsure what year this was, but it had to be in the 70s or 80s. The house didn't have AC, so they were sleeping on the front porch, as it was so warm. The dog kept barking and barking, so she went out to look and see. She saw a craft beaming light down onto a large oak tree that used to stand at the end of the neighbor's drive. She stood and watched for a few moments, and the craft turned off the light and shot off into the distance. This woman was once going to become a nun. I believe every word she said. I've been to the site with the big oak tree. It was the largest tree around and obviously ancient. It was cut down in the late 90s/early 2000s. Her father, my great-grandfather, lived in the same area growing up. When he was dating my great-grandmother, he used to walk to and from their house to visit. He left late one night, and it was dark walking home. This area is heavily wooded, and the road was a dirt road at the time. He reached a location that the locals referred to as the home of a witch woman who lived in the woods. As he passed by the house, something followed him out of the woods and onto the road. He described it as crawling, slinking along the ground, and following in his footsteps. When he would stop, it would stop. He said he'd turn around fully to look at it, and it would stand on two legs and walk and follow him. He said it wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a mountain lion. He described it as having light-colored fur or skin. It was taller than him, at least 7 feet. He said he felt as if he couldn't run or he knew it would get him. He finally made it to their driveway and got into the house. My dad and my grandfather saw silver flying saucers working their farm in S.E., Missouri in the 80s. They'd dance around in the sunset and shoot off as fast as you can imagine. Not far from this area, the first UFO crash in the nation happened in 1941 in Cape Girardeau, before Roswell. It isn't well known. Around 2010, I was near Piedmont, Missouri, on a camping trip. We went to a place called Graves Mountain to look at the stars. There was a group of creatures cackling in the night. My uncle, who hunts the area, said he's never heard that sound before and doesn't know what it was. For years I looked for the same animal sound and found a video of a supposed Sasquatch sighting. It cackled just like the animal did that night. This sound was recorded in the Pacific Northwest, however, it was captured far from the location where I heard this phenomenon. It was like a demented hyena laugh. My husband and I also saw a trio of UFO lights. This was in NW, Missouri about 8 years ago. We had gotten home late from a party and were sitting on the front porch. It was probably 2:30 or so in the morning. These 3 lights in the sky were coming from the south. I'm not exactly sure how high in the sky they were, but they were strange. They looked like a kind of bluish/white light, like stars. As they moved, they also spun and oscillated together while keeping an equal distance between the lights. It appeared as if the lights separated and then came back together in the group. There were 3 separate lights, and stars were visible between them, suggesting that they were not part of a solid object or craft. We attempted to follow the lights around the corner of the house as they moved north, but we lost sight of them while navigating our uneven yard, which required us to look down for footing. We have observed stealth bombers, Starlink satellites, and the International Space Station, ISS. We know what normal things look like in the sky and had never seen this creature before. My sister used to see a hooded, cloaked figure at the foot of her bed. We shared a room for 10 years. I never saw it. She said I'd sleep talk about scary things when the ghost was present. I've had several spooky ghost stories happen. Strange occurrences seem to follow my family and me. I'm not sure why this is happening. Years ago I worked in a group home for people experiencing disabilities. At the time I usually worked nights, but because it was a low-key home, staff was allowed to sleep for a few hours during the overnight shift. A little while after getting up one morning, I was walking towards the kitchen and looked over into the living room. I'd left my cell phone on the floor next to the couch where I'd slept. A small, childlike hand reached out from under the couch toward my phone. I hurried over. The other hand grabbed my phone and started to pull it under the couch. It was a flip phone, and the mystery hand was wrapped around half of it. I grabbed the other half, and we had a brief tug of war over it, but after a couple of seconds I was able to pull my phone out of the grasp of the other hand. Once the mystery hand lost my phone, it quickly went back under the couch. My hand didn't touch the other hand, so I can't tell you what it felt like. I can imagine, though. It had wrinkly, dry-looking gray skin. The fingers had long nails that came to a point and were yellowed. I don't know what it was or why it wanted my phone. I can only assume it was some sort of gremlin or goblin. None of my coworkers ever had an experience like it when I asked, or really had any experiences other than maybe an occasional unexplained noise. It was one of the creepiest things I have ever experienced, and it still creeps me out thinking about it. Well, here's one. Growing up in suburban South Florida, I always thought my neighborhood was banal and devoid of anything intriguing. But wait, how could I have forgotten about the old 1920s era estate, The Deering Estate, only a few miles away from my house. Today the estate is a public park. Well, it turns out that the estate was once home to a federation of Indian villages, of the Tequesta, who predated Spanish contact and the later arrival of Seminole and Micoshqui tribes. I once read that the last remnants of the Tequesta were sold into slavery in Cuba. There is an ancient burial mound on the Deering Estate property that has never been excavated. A large, twisting oak tree grows from the center of the mound. I went on a private tour once guided by a friend's relative who worked on the estate. She told us that preliminary survey work, or x-rays of some kind, has shown that there are 5 male skeletons buried in the mound, face down, with their heads pointing towards the oak tree, like spokes radiating out from a wheel. As she is telling us all of this, we are approaching the mound on a boardwalk that winds through the woods. As we get close, a large owl flies out of the top of the oak tree. Our guide casually remarks something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, that's the owl that lives up in the top of the oak tree growing from the mound." So I thought my particular stretch of suburbs was boring, but it turns out that there is an ancient, unexcavated mystical site only miles away. And, make of it what you will, an owl keeps watch over the ancient burial mound. My friend's relative told us that they have conducted seances at the mound. They even have regular ghost tours open to the public. After repeatedly asking if anyone wanted to make their presence known, nothing happened. And then they restated their questions in Spanish. On doing so, a large dead branch fell to the ground only feet from where they were sitting. I think all this is especially interesting in light of the saying your family members pass down to you. I, for one, love owls and find them beautiful and fascinating creatures. If I ever get to repeat the experience of watching one silently fly over me in the wilderness late at night, I'll consider it a blessing. Strange events have occurred at my grandparents' house. I'm at my grandparents' house right now and was thinking about the weird things that have happened here and decided to share about them here. To describe my grandparents' house, it's pretty much the kind of house where you would expect something weird to happen. It's old, with 2 floors and a basement, with a lot of creepy looking dolls, out in the middle of nowhere, on a hill, with some wooded areas around it. 1. This is the least likely to be paranormal. It could have been an animal, but I included it anyway. So, there's this big hill near my grandparents' house, and there's an old abandoned barn up there, but I've never actually seen the barn because it's further back in a forest area. There are some paths that are cut, but the rest of the area is covered in weeds and trees. We sometimes go up there to play hide and seek at night. One night, several years ago, we were playing hide and seek, and I and one of my cousins were hiding. We were at the corner of one of the paths, and we heard something in the weeds. Whatever it was started coming towards us. Initially, we thought it was just the dog that lived outside, as he would typically be there when we were, but after turning on our flashlight and seeing nothing, whatever was approaching us turned around and ran in the opposite direction. We can see the weeds moving, but we can't see anything in them. The weeds weren't tall enough to hide something big, so whatever it was had to be small enough to not be seen but big enough to cause a noticeable shift in the weeds. We immediately run and stop in front of a shed. The dog comes up from the house, so it wasn't him. Our grandma, who was looking for us, says she thought she heard something in the weeds as well. 2. This one is a lot more recent and scares me the most. It happened last summer, I think. My cousin and I were there alone. Our grandpa was in the hospital, and our grandma was going to see him. It started with us just hearing weird creaks from upstairs, which isn't exactly unusual for the house, but we were still creeped out. We went to the kitchen to grab some food, and on the way back, my cousin looked upstairs and said she saw a shadow up there. The shadow alone wouldn't have bothered me. She could have been wrong, and she definitely would make it up to scare me, but at the same time, I heard a loud sound coming from the kitchen. We ran into the kitchen, and the basement door was open. It couldn't have been wind or anything else. Something opened the door. We sat down and tried to ignore everything, and something fell off the table behind me. That was the first time I had ever felt such fear, even though I've been creeped out there a lot before. 3. This one is the most recent and happened only a few months ago. At the house, there's a porch area where they used to keep wood for fires, and there's a window to it in the TV room. My cousins and I went to spend the weekend there, and when we are all together, we sleep in the TV room. In the morning, my grandmother inquired whether any of us had been making noise or banging objects downstairs. We hadn't. Later, I noticed that the outside door to the porch area was open. My grandma just said it was because it was unlocked, so the wind blew it open. She later went out to close and lock it. After I returned home, she called me and mentioned that the door had opened again, even though it was locked. She also checked, and the sound she had heard during the night was something banging on the door from the porch to the house. I lived in a haunted house alone from my teens to young adulthood. It was my grandfather's house, but he lived with his GF. So I basically lived alone. I had many, strange things happen there. Which all stemmed from what I thought was just sleep paralysis. Initially, the only weird thing was that I'd go to sleep but wake up to that sensation. Each time I woke up paralyzed, I was gradually able to move a little more and muster the strength to shift my gaze toward what was standing at the foot of my bed, where there was always a dark shadow. Finally, one day it happened, I was able to discover that it was myself standing at the foot of my bed. I heard a weird noise at that moment, and my brain, went nuts. Once that happened, all the insane, absurd things I have ever experienced occurred. Stuff where I can't really tell how much of it was real or not. One major oddity stands out. My brother and his friend stayed with me for a few days once. I worked the night shift. So I'd get home at 6 a.m. My brother's friend asked why I stood there standing in the corner watching them sleep. I assured him that was not possible. I was at work. The next night, my brother asked me the same question. Why was I standing across from him at night? I also told him it wasn't me. I was at work. I physically couldn't have done that. Both of them swear it was me. They insisted it was me because of the size. I'm not very tall, and they said it was my silhouette, exactly my height. Eventually I moved out. Gramps died, and the house got sold because the grandson who inherited it couldn't live in it. Too much shit went on, he could never sleep. He also told me he thought I had the key to the place still. Woke up and thought I broke in. We aren't on good terms. I almost started a fist fight over the accusation until he realized how dumb it would be for me to break in just to watch him sleep. One old neighbor from there that I still talk to did say they see me in that house once in a while. Except it's me from over 20 years ago, or so I'm told. I have no idea what to make of being told that other than, man, that is pretty ducking weird. I've not experienced anything of the level of high strangeness after moving out of that place. It will always remain a mystery to me why that house had such weird shit going on in it. I live with this sensation of wanting to be back in that house, though. It almost feels as though I need to visit that place before I die. It's this weird feeling of, I left my keys, my wallet, my phone, whatever you could think of, that item that you leave behind that gives an uncomfortable feeling, damn it. I left it at the house, I need to pick it up. Well, that's how I feel, and how I've felt, for over 20 years, and I've never been able to go back and get whatever it is that I left behind. I can't investigate any of this. As a result, I am always left wondering, I don't know what that was. I probably won't ever know. I keep seeing this woman, weird stuff keeps happening, and there are more spooky and possibly unrelated occurrences. It all started a few years ago when I was 9 or 10. Around that age. My family had just finished looking at stars outside, and while they were taking the telescope, I had forgotten something in the yard. So I ran out to get it. I didn't feel uneasy at all, which was kind of weird for me at that age. I was scared of the dark. Everything was fine. I picked up the item and looked across the street into my friend's yard. I saw something. It was kind of blurry at first. I peered at it for a while, until suddenly my blood went cold. About 30 feet away, in the middle of the house's lawn, was a woman with long black hair and pale skin. She was looking at her feet. She kind of looked like one of those Japanese horror movie ghosts. Now I know that sounds really cliché, but I think that's just what my young mind made out of it, because I had seen a scary ghost with those features when playing a computer game with my sister. Nancy Drew, Shadow at the Water's Edge. It was also pretty dark out, and my view might have been messed up because when your eyes are adjusted to the dark, your vision gets grainy, so I'm not completely sure. After seeing this, I sprinted into my house and slammed the door. Last year, I had moved into a new house so I could easily access a nearby junior high school. It was the end of summer, and I was going downstairs to get pencils for school. They're located at a desk, to the left of which is a long hallway containing 3 doorways and a bathroom at the end. Although that in itself sounds like a recipe for a spooky disaster, that's not where I saw it. When grabbing the pencils, I turned to the left to sharpen them. Then, in the music room, I saw it again. I saw the woman. She wasn't looking at her feet anymore. Without hesitation I scrambled up the stairs in panic, gripping the unsharpened pencils in my trembling hands. My heart was pounding. I grabbed my tiny dog and ran to my room, where I locked the door and prayed on my bed. I'm not a very religious person. I was terrified, but I don't remember how scared I felt in those minutes. I remember being scared, but I don't remember the feeling. I'm not sure if that's important to put in here, but oh well. I didn't go down there for at least 2 weeks. Pretty recently, like a week ago, I was cleaning my room, which is very strange and uncommon to begin with. I was taking stuff to the basement into the storage room. The last room to the right of the long hallway. I gathered up courage and tried to lighten the mood by saying dumb things like, "Ooh, this is spoopy. Hope I don't get a spook." When I was done putting stuff away, I went back in the hallway and closed the door. I was picking up the empty box when all of a sudden, crash. The 10 pounds glass ceiling light fell and hit my head. Again, I ran upstairs out of breath. My sister was home, and I told her about it. It could have been that I closed the door too hard and made it fall down. I had also walked under a ladder a day or two earlier, just because. I'm not very superstitious, though, and finally, I could have angered the spooky ghost lady. Also, my sleep recorder keeps picking up doors closing early in the morning. Anyways, those are my spooky encounters with the paranormal or something. Thanks for getting this far. A memory of a figure. I've spent much of my life, as many do, trying to face down certain fears. I can bravely say that I have always been an afraid person. I slept in my parents' room well beyond a reasonable age. If I were to use the restroom at night, every light would have to be turned on and only turned off when I was safely back in my room. I still have difficulty sleeping with my back to an open space. Growing up with these simple fears and growing into manhood, I spent much of my time proving to myself and others that I was brave and fearless. I have experienced many amazing situations due to this need for courage. I have slept nights under the stars on the Appalachian and Pacific Crest trails. I've crossed the United States twice, opting to sleep at sometimes isolated rest stops instead of hotels. I explored off the beaten path foreign countries to maintain that I was strong enough to face the world. I say all this because, for me, this story is to explore an experience in my life, in my memory, that I can never explain. It isn't necessarily scary. I wasn't afraid at the time of the experience, but I am still afraid to remember it. Occasionally, I ponder whether all my fears stem from this particular moment. I grew up in rural central Georgia, USA, on a small soybean farm. My father had chosen to build his home on a dirt road less than a quarter of a mile from his parents, my grandparents. I spent most of my summer days with my grandmother, as it was a free source of childcare. I was not an easy kid to handle behaviorally. I talked back and threw fits when I did not get my way and explored/plundered endlessly. My grandmother was always serious about her cooking. She has spent much of her life in the kitchen feeding my entire family. I would dig through cabinets and drawers as she battered and fried any food under the sun. My grandmother would get understandably frustrated with my rambunctiousness while she cooked. To remedy this, her tactic was to tell me to take whatever item I had found that day into the living room to watch TV. I vividly remember being 5 years old, an age not easily recalled. I remember it as if it were a dream from the night before. On this particular day, under the china cabinet, I had found a wicker basket full of rocks or stones. Some were smooth and polished with jagged edges. Another was bigger, made of a more porous stone with a bowl-like area worn into it. I had these and several other pieces strewn about the floor in front of me, examining them, imagining for what purpose they might be used. Over my shoulder, toward the kitchen doorway where my grandmother would be cooking, I began to feel her presence. Assuming it was just her checking in on me, I ignored the feeling. The feeling might have turned into something stronger, because eventually I turned around to look behind me. In the doorway stood a man. The exposed skin of his body looked red, a deeper, more copper skin than I had ever seen before or have seen since this day. I remember a muscular build and colorful garments, although I can't remember with enough accuracy the style of clothing. Any attempts to remember clothes seem like a polluted thought imposed upon by stereotypical Native American garb. This man, I remember, looked directly at me. He then turned to the back portion of the small country house and once again back at me. Without a word from either of us, he turned and began walking in the direction he had gazed, out of my sight. After a moment of naive thought, I stand and follow to where I had seen this copper-skinned man. I am now standing in the doorway to the kitchen, visible to my grandmother and also where the vision had stood. I look, expecting to see him in the parlor-like area beyond the dining area. To my confusion, the man was outside the house. Seen through the panes of glass in a closed window. He was disappearing in the soybean stalks. "John. You okay?" My grandmother called me back to reality. My memory fails me here yet again. I can't recall if I asked her then and there if she had seen the man, but in more recent conversations she has expressed not remembering the day but verified that I often played with the arrowheads and Indian artifacts. I don't remember having spoken about this event openly for some time afterwards. I do remember being still young and forming my first concepts of Native Americans and having these events spur terrifyingly back into my consciousness. Harvesting soybeans with my grandfather in a combine tractor, one afternoon we drove over a dry, sandy spot in the field. I asked him why nothing grew there. His answer caused me great fear. The dry spot, he said, was a naturally occurring irrigation route. He collected many of the arrowheads and the grinding stone along the sand here. He said it was possible a family of Creek Indians had lived on this land we now owned. I don't remember being afraid of the events that day until later in life. I grew into the fear as I pieced together, still as a child, that I had seen something currently that may have existed previously. The fear that I still battle today may be due to learning about the paranormal before I was able to understand it. Thank you all for listening and any ideas you might have to share with me about this instance. My daughter and I took a road trip through Michigan's Upper Peninsula last summer. We spent a few nights hiking the Porcupine Mountains, spent a couple of days exploring the Keweenaw Peninsula, and were headed from Houghton to Marquette to jump off the Black Rocks into Lake Superior before heading back home. She was 15, and the trip provided a great opportunity to get comfortable behind the wheel. US 41 is pretty remote at times. We were listening to the avalanches, "We Will Always Love You," which is filled with space sounds, beeps, etc., and I must have missed hearing the gas light come on because she said, Dad, the Jeep won't go any faster." I knew we were out of gas immediately, so I said, "Ease it to the side of the road, we're out of gas." "That's on me." I called AAA roadside assistance, and because of how remote the area is and the fact that it was Sunday, they told me it could be 2 hours plus for a gas delivery. We got beach towels out and sat on the ground between the road and the forest. I read she made bracelets. After a while, she asked me if I wanted to do push-ups, and I snapped no to her without explaining myself. I was sore from backpacking in the Porcupine Mountains, and I kept reading. We sat for about an hour before a small pickup pulled up. I stood up and approached the truck, sticking my head in the passenger window. It was an old man in a two-seater. "You guys okay?" I realized it wasn't AAA but a Good Samaritan. I said, "Yeah, we ran out of gas." He said, "Well, we can get some gas for you," and as we both looked at his front seat covered with newspapers and wrappers, I noticed my daughter still sitting there making bracelets. He then added, "I'll be back. Do you have water and snacks?" "Yes, thank you, and whatever you spend on gas, I'll reimburse and add some extra on top." He said, "Well, I'll be right back," and you turned away from us. He returned in about 25 minutes with a 5-gallon jerry can of gas. I took it from the front seat and set it down behind my Jeep. I got my wallet out and asked how much I owed him, holding the cash. He said, "I don't want any of your money," and I continued to press him to take it. Eventually he said, "Well, you can throw that money in the ditch and hope someone else finds it, but I'm not taking it." I put it away and reached out to shake his hand. As we stood shaking hands, I said, "Thank you so much, what's your name?" I was looking him in the eyes, feeling profoundly moved. He paused for a moment and said, "I think we know each other." Our hands separated. I offered some cash one last time. He responded, "If you want to feel better about this, you could do some push-ups later." I put the gas in the Jeep. He followed us to the next gas station and kept on driving. Not really personal, but my grandmother witnessed something strange in her house in the 90s. It was a small house with an attic. One day she heard something running around the attic from one side to the other, stomping very loudly. The dog that was in the house was going crazy and barking at the entrance to the attic. After some time, the stomping stopped, and she and her mother climbed into the attic to check what it was, but there was no one there. No one could get in or out of there, because the roof of the attic had no windows. In addition, in the same village they sometimes noticed flying orbs that hung over the electrical substation and then quickly took off into the sky. I want to note that this was somewhere between the 80s and 90s in western Ukraine, quite close to the local former storage of nuclear warheads. Then few people had television or radio, no one knew what it was, but it scared people terribly. Something strange and scary happened in the middle of the night, still shaken. This happened last Wednesday or Thursday night, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I was in and out of light sleep all night, so around 4 a.m. I put in some earplugs and started meditating, hoping it would help me finally drift off. For context, my husband and I sleep in separate rooms. He's a deep sleeper who moves around a lot, and I'm a very light sleeper. He was in the guest room at the opposite end of our condo, and I was in the master bedroom. Our 2 cats were sleeping peacefully next to me in bed. Just as I was slipping into that calm meditative state, a loud, aggressive bang hit the window right next to me. It startled me so badly I sat up straight and pulled my earplugs out. I felt anxious and fearful immediately, which is not like me. The cats immediately jumped up into a low, alert stance and began slowly creeping toward the window, totally on edge. They were clearly reacting to something real. So I look out the window, fearing a bird has flown into it or something, but nothing is there. Then I saw the reflection of someone passing by the open bedroom door on the walls. I assumed it was my husband getting up to check what the noise was, but when I looked to the door, a large, dark figure walked past the door again in the same direction as before, not my husband. It was just a large, dark, human-like figure that caused the cats to react defensively in the same way they had when they heard the bang at the window. I'm thinking someone may have broken in? Then another loud bang from the living room area outside of the bedroom. It sounded as if someone or something had slapped the side of the building hard. We're on the 3rd floor. At that point, I was frozen. I normally handle strange things calmly, but this felt different, heavy, dark. I called for my husband, nothing. After a few terrifying seconds, I finally ran across the condo and jumped into bed with him. I was panicked, and the cats followed and hid under the bed too. He was half asleep, but I explained what's happening, and he dismissed it at first, which made me feel even more unsettled. But in the morning, he could tell how shaken I was, and he's been sleeping next to me every night since. Part of me wants to believe it was a dream or sleep paralysis, which I haven't experienced before. But the way I felt and both cats reacting so specifically and intensely makes me think something else was going on. Has anyone experienced anything similar? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. About a year ago, I was working for a company that shared a warehouse building with a few other businesses. Each had its warehouse doors. The building itself was inside of a gated property that you needed a key to get into. The property was littered with semi-trucks, construction equipment, etc., as it was also used as a storage property. I'm on my way to work. The sun hasn't come up yet, but the sky has started to brighten into that light blue color. It's around 5:30 a.m., and I'm usually the first one there. So as I'm walking down the road, I hear some of my coworkers talking about 100 yards away. I look over and see that they are just fooling around. 2 of them are climbing a tree while the others stand around smoking cigarettes. This behavior is not unusual for them, but it is strange that they are not near our warehouse and arrived about an hour early, which is really unusual. So I start walking towards them to see what's going on. As I get within about 30 yards, they start to disappear, like somebody walking into a heavy fog. And I look up in the tree, thinking they are playing a prank on me, trying to hide. But they are gone, so I figure, whatever, I'll handle it when they clock in. So I start to walk back towards the warehouse, and I hear them talking again. Not just voices, but they're distinct voices. I can even hear what they are saying. So I turn around and start heading towards them again. I can see which ones are wearing shorts and pants and hoodies very distinctly. But when I get close to them again, they just vanish. I admit defeat and pass it off as an oddity and continue towards the warehouse. As I'm approaching the warehouse, I can see the other half of my team standing in front of the building. Their cars are not in the small parking lot, the lights aren't on, and again I think how weird it is that they are there so early. The 4 of them are debating on how best to install a flag on the flagpole that sits on the property of one of the other businesses, which is also strange because each business kept to itself and didn't have anything to do with the other's property. I'm standing there looking at them, wondering what in the hell they are doing, and they just go on without even acknowledging me. As I walk closer, they sort of just fade into the bushes that sit at the bottom of the flagpole. So I stick my hands in the bushes, thinking again they are trying to prank me, but I find no one. Then I walk over to the guardrail at the edge of the parking lot and sit down, asking myself what the duck is going on, trying to make sense of what was happening, all the while they are standing around the flagpole discussing their objective again like nothing happened. This was on a Monday, and I had called off the previous Saturday, so the last time I saw them was Friday. Our industry is dangerous, and I begin to think that a terrible accident occurred on Saturday, resulting in the deaths of all my coworkers. I broke down into tears thinking that every one of my coworkers had been killed, and I'm sitting here seeing their ghosts as the last remaining employee of this company. So I sit for a while, not sure how to proceed, until I decide I need to go around back. If I see their cars parked around back, I will know that it was all a prank because that's the only other spot you could really park without having to walk a mile to the building. So I get to the back and find nothing. But I look into the cab of one of the other company's trucks and see one of my coworkers. This is really strange, because as I said, we don't really mess with each other's property, but we would never have a reason to be in one of their trucks. Especially not the driver's seat. So I approach the vehicle, and I ask him what's going on, and he screams at me to get away from him. I ask him why, and he says, "You're not really my name." I keep asking him questions, but I get no more responses from him. So I go back around to the front and into the building, my nerves on edge, and pace around until it's time to clock in, thinking that if there was an accident and there were ghosts, somebody would be there to tell me about it by then. About 30 minutes pass, and one of the guys pulls up and comes into the building, and I'm looking at him speechless. He says, "What's up with you?" I say, WTF was that man? Not cool. And he asks me what I'm talking about. I asked him if he had been playing a prank on me, and he said no. I asked him if he had been around the flagpole earlier, and he said, no, why would I mess with that? That's not our job. The rest of the crew eventually showed up and were equally as clueless about what I was telling them. Has anyone ever had an experience like this where you see and hear somebody who is alive and well but also not there at all? This happened like 10 years ago. I live near Boston, where the traffic sucks, and it would take over an hour to get to and from work every day, when it would have taken 20 to 30 minutes without traffic, but there was always traffic. One day, I was only on the highway for about 10 minutes when the traffic started thinning out. Suddenly I was only, one of 3 cars on the road at rush hour on the way home. Then a super heavy fog rolled in. Giant military vehicles with men on the back of the trucks with crazy weapons began passing me, about a dozen of them. It looked like something out of an apocalypse or zombie movie. They did not interact with me or acknowledge me. It went on for about 2 to 3 miles. I was panicking and was trying to find an exit but also going slow enough to try to get them to pass me. They got off at Neponset Avenue, which is one of the first exits outside of the city going south. The weather went back to normal, and the traffic came back. Like nothing had happened. There was nothing on the news. I shared it on social group to see if anyone else commuting saw anything, but no. No clues at all as to what happened. Weird radio transmission thing. My family owns a cabin in Minnesota, and we decided to head over there for Maya weekend. I was 14 at the time, and I brought my best friend along, and so did my sister. Anyway, we had a great time playing in the secluded woods that surround our cabin. But then something really strange happened. On Saturday night, my dad, my friend, my sister, her friend, and I decided to play ping pong. At the time, my dad really liked this Bluetooth speaker he had recently gotten. So he decided to play the radio from his phone to the speaker. It was all normal. Suddenly as we were playing ping pong, the radio cut out and was replaced by this eerie, resonating tribal chanting, drum beats. All of us just stopped what we were doing and froze. We were incredibly weirded out. Looking back, we remembered the ground shaking, and the upstairs also looked like it was shaking. To us, it sounded like it was coming from upstairs, but that was impossible, since the radio was downstairs with us. Suddenly, as quickly as it began, it just cut right back into the song that was playing before this strange event. Even weirder, when I went upstairs to see if my mom heard it too, she said she didn't hear a thing, even though all of us agreed that the house was shaking. It is a few months later, and my mom, my aunt, and my sister are going for a walk through our trails that cut through the woods. Suddenly, as they were ambling around, my aunt and my sister heard drum beats in the distance. So our cabin is pretty much in the middle of nowhere, and the people who do live near it don't play the drums. So it is incredibly weird to hear drum beats in the woods, in the middle of nowhere. But what I thought was even stranger is that once again my mom didn't hear the noise, even though she was right next to my aunt and my sister. It is even more months later, and my mom and my dad were in the hot tub that we have at the cabin. They were just chilling when my mom looked behind her and saw a man standing right there, with his one hand clenched and above his head. My mom screamed and moved away from that spot. Whatever it was disappears. I was in my room at the time, and I remember hearing my mom scream and wondering what that was about. The strange thing here is that this time my mom was the only one to see it. I don't know what is going on up at our cabin, an Indian burial ground? But if more stuff happens I will share again. I wonder if anyone can offer any explanation or similar experience to these strange events. Before this experience, I didn't believe in ghosts, apparitions, or anything like that. In 1996 I worked for a produce delivery company, and one particular morning I was delivering to a retirement home. I entered through the back door into the kitchen looking for anyone who looked like they worked there, but nobody was home. I entered a big dining/game room with a giant wall window that overlooked the golf course and outdoor area. I saw one man in this big hall standing in front of the window, seeming to enjoy the foggy morning view. He was much older, bald, and wearing a tweed jacket and dress pants with black loafers, which led me to assume he was a resident. I called out to him but guessed he may have had his hearing aid off or whatever. I called out even louder, saying, "Excuse me, where can I find an employee?" This time he turned his head but not all the way around, like maybe he heard something but was otherwise unaware of anyone behind him. Finally the kitchen manager from the back office of the kitchen heard me yelling, and he came out. I turned to greet him. I announced myself, shook his hand, and gave him the paper to sign the order, which took maybe 5 seconds max, turned around, and the old man was gone. Weird, no old man could move that fast out of that big hall. He'd have to run 50 feet in 5 seconds flat to the door, something most people couldn't do silently, especially not an oldster. I turned back to the manager and jokingly said something along the lines of, "You got some fast old folks around here," assuming the manager had seen the old guy run away, like maybe he wasn't supposed to be out of bed or something. The manager was really taken aback by what I said and was like, "What the heck are you talking about, buddy?" And I looked back to where I'd seen him and explained that the old guy must have run like a cheetah to get to the exit across the room to get away from the manager's detection. I remember these words crystal clear. "OHH, Ed, you saw Ed, he's our ghost." I got a weird feeling and didn't really ask for an explanation. My reaction at the time was kind of like, "Ha ha, good one, a ghost, ooh ooh." The guy explains that Ed likes the view of the golf course and likes to mess with people sometimes by calling out to them asking for help. I still think it's a joke until the manager tells me what Ed is wearing: a tweed jacket with dress pants and black loafers. After that I just kind of accepted what had just happened to me. After reanalyzing the situation, there's no way a hunched over old man could get away in the time it took me to lose him, especially completely silenced. He just seemed so real, not transparent or floating, just a dude standing there in his own world. I've ever seen or had any paranormal experiences outside of that one, but man, it was very weird. It's very confusing to me. The idea of a ghost is a person who no longer exists but is still here somehow. I used to manage a country club that was built in the late 1800s, burnt down in 1928, and rebuilt in 1929 to 1930. There were a ton of weird things that happened there, ranging from lights flickering when we talked about ghosts to my boss seeing an apparition completely dressed in 1800s clothing and wooden shoes to shadowy people moving incredibly fast through the hallways. Also, I was touched on the back of the neck in the basement once. One time I went down in the basement to use the employee restroom. We had a locker room attached to it as well. There were 2 stalls straight ahead when you walked in. I walked into the left stall and stood there to take a leak. Mind you, the restroom is entirely empty. I was the only one in there. There was also only 1 or 2 other employees left, as it was just after closing time. Now about halfway through urinating, I noticed something move out of my peripheral vision. I turned my head to look, and as I gazed under the stall, I saw a pair of pale, corpse-like feet standing in the stall next to me, facing my direction. Then they immediately faded away. I got the most intense spine-shivering chill, and all the hair on my body stood up at once. I booked it out of there, grabbed the other employees and my keys from the office, locked the doors, and ran the duck out of that place. The scariest supernatural experience of my life. Owl attacks tiny humanoid. I was 13 years old in the summer of 1989. That's the year we moved from what I perceived as a big city, Corvallis, Oregon, to some isolated property outside of the town of Waterloo, Oregon, Pop. 200 or 250, depending on time of year, away from the friends I grew up with and with no real way to meet any new friends while school was on summer break. I spent a lot of time wandering the backwoods or exploring the river with my dog, Bo. From the instant we crossed the fence and started down the overgrown path through those backwoods, we had odd feelings about the place. The trees were very old, and moss hung from their branches. Huge ferns circled the trunks of the trees, hiding the place where tree meets soil. Old and broken branches lay crisscross atop the huge ferns, berry bushes, small newborn trees, and other shrubbery. Everywhere off the barely visible pathway leading through the dark center seemed like hiding places for creatures unknown. Monsters are always watching and waiting. So we stayed on the path. Always. We hadn't lived there long when we began to notice our antenna television reception cutting out at night. In the morning we would look up on the roof to see it bent this way and that. Such a big antenna would take an even bigger creature to bend and destroy it. This wasn't the tricks and troubles of the wind. As we found out quickly, our antenna was now the new rest stop for a very old great horned owl as he flew from the backwoods to the river every night. The owl also explained the missing of 2 of the 3 kittens we just adopted. One late afternoon, Bo and I went exploring further back in the woods than previously. As we approached a creek, we noticed some small holes in a sandbank on the opposite side. Leading to each hole were many messy markings of some unknown animal. I thought little of it, but Bo was oddly fixed on the bigger of the holes in the bank. He ran across the creek and buried his nose as far as he could into the hole. A noise, much like a cat when it fights, came from the hole, and suddenly Bo yelped and withdrew his nose. He stood there, staring at the entrance, growling and barking and beginning to dig. I had never seen him like this. I called for him, but he didn't listen. I called again. Finally, I shouted loud enough to startle him and get his attention. We headed home, but the whole way Bo kept looking behind him at something growling, hair standing up on his back. He seemed both frightened and worried. I saw nothing behind us. As we arrived at the fence and crossed out of the woods, I turned to look back. That's when I saw something very strange and frightening. Not far behind us, in a huge fern a few feet off the path, I swore I saw a tiny face looking back at me. Not the face of any animal I know of, and not the face of a human. It looked human-like, but not human. I blinked and it was gone. The sun was falling as we ran up to the house. My father was standing at the barbecue, drink in one hand, burger flipper in the other. Just as soon as he asked me what was wrong, I was already telling my story in a rushed, nonsensical, and dramatic way. He laughed, made a few jokes, and asked me if I wanted him to go beat it up. Nothing calms you down and makes you change your story quicker than a parent's ridicule. So I shut up. Less than an hour later, we all sat outside on the porch eating our barbecue dinner. We were also watching and waiting for the owl to make his appearance. We didn't have to wait long. Suddenly, I saw him gliding through the air and heading straight for the antenna on the roof. But as he approached, he made one big flap of his wings and shot right over the antenna, the roof, and the house. As he cleared the house, he took a strong dive toward a big patch of blackberry bushes that intertwined with a great fern and some trees planted many years before as we prepared the land for our coming. The great owl turned from his dive and stretched out his talons just as he made contact with the fern. Immediately, I thought of our third cat. This was going to break my sister's heart. A loud noise, one like a cat screaming, came from the fern. The owl faltered in his fluid flying motion and stumbled to the ground. Within the fern, we could hear the sounds of two animals fighting for their lives. I ran toward the fern. My dad ran with me as we raced to rescue our poor kitty. But just before we approached the fern, the owl shot out and up into the sky. There was no cat in its claws, but that same cat sound was coming from a small creature it captured. Suddenly, just as the owl reached the edge of the forest, we saw it drop the struggling creature. A silhouette of a tiny person, no taller than a foot, fell to the ground. I was frozen. My dad began to run toward the woods. Suddenly, my dad, a big, manly, macho guy, stopped dead in his tracks. And as he stopped, I could see the silhouette of a tiny head floating above the grass, heading for the woods. We watched as it reached the fence and climbed through it, disappearing into the black of the woods. For many years, my dad refused to admit what we saw. I moved away a few years later, but my dad still lives on that property. His old age has sometimes allowed for slip-ups. A number of times he has told me about this damn coon or that litter of foxes that, without fail, seem to tip his trash cans, scare his dog, a huge wolf dog, and make noise under the house all night long. Once when I asked him why he didn't set a trap or call animal control to get rid of these pests, he replied, under his breath and without thinking, "Tell me where I can buy a Littleman trap." Just last year he confessed to me what he saw. He also told me many stories of encounters with what he calls bratty little troublemakers. He says he has woken up to them walking on his back or playing in his room. They mess with his alarm clock and turn the dials of the living room stereo up full blast so that when it's turned on, my dad gets a good startle. They eat the dog food, scratch up his car, and mimic him when he yells and screams at them. He shoots at them when he can but no longer leaves his gun by his bedside. He says that they have tried to steal it before. I know what I saw, but these stories were almost too much for me to take seriously. If I didn't know my dad and how hard it is for him to admit being messed by tiny people, I would think he was messing with me, but he's not. They are driving him crazy, and he has now sold the property he loves so much. He warned the new buyers, my aunt, and her family. But until they experience the little people living in the backwoods for themselves, to them my dad is just telling stories. I've had a number of strange encounters over the years. 1. Encountered a weird woman. She was telling me about demons and the sort. That night, I fell asleep all right but woke up to hearing howling in the distance. It wasn't one of our dogs or any nearby dogs, and it didn't sound like an animal either. Instead, it had a somewhat human quality. I fell asleep without thinking much of it, but when I woke up, the room was dark even though the lights were still on. It felt as if someone had placed a sheet of black plastic over my eyes, yet I could still barely see through it. My eyes were fully opened, and I could sit up and move about all right, as I needed the restroom. Went back asleep and woke up at about twilight. The heaviest thing felt like it was pressing down on my chest, like an elephant calf was sitting on it. I closed my eyes and heard that howling noise again but felt like it was coming from on top of me. It was loud and sent me into a panic. I saw the woman again a week later, and the first thing she said was, "Did you hear the howling too?" And told me she went through something similar. She was in her 40s, and I was 16-17 at the time. 2. During a trip to the forest with my primary school, I saw a goatman humanoid figure. It wasn't Halloween either, and his body proportions looked too good to be cosplay. His legs were bent in that natural deer/goat looking way, and I know this illusion can be pulled off decently well if you look at fursuits, but this was bent so much that it couldn't have been a cosplay suit. His arms looked overly hairy, and he had little stubs as horns. He was in the forest, sitting on a rock with a cloak on. I started looking at him, and then I noticed him standing up to take his cloak off. He was completely naked, and his body resembled a human's but transitioned to goat legs at the level of his belly button. His feet appeared to be partly human and partly hoofed. His face looked more diamond-shaped, akin to a goat, but still had human-esque features like normal eyes, mouth, and nose, from what I could tell. The sight was not a part of the experience of the trip, as we went to do bird watching and to collect leaves and acorns for a school project. Nobody else, as far as I'm aware, saw it, and I'm not in contact with anybody from primary school to even ask. 3. Recently, while on the bus home from college, I observed a flying figure in the sky. It was neither a bird nor any type of aircraft such as a helicopter or drone. It looked similar to the Grim Reaper without his scythe. Torn up, clacked, ghostly looking thing. I'd say about 200 feet up in the air. It was just hovering there, not moving quickly, and seemed to be floating aimlessly. He seemed to be doing nothing, as if flying was simply a hobby or a way for him to relax in his spare time. I saw him for about 10 minutes, as there was a road blockage due to a caravan crash. I overheard people speaking to each other about the crash a few days later, and one of them said, "Yep, both drivers died as well as a passenger in the van." 4. I once saw a white, blonde woman on their laptop minding their own business in a cafe. I was outside waiting for someone and looked around and then looked back into the cafe, and where that woman was sitting, a black man was sitting there now. Shaved head, bearded, with glasses on. Same laptop, cup of drink was in the same place. I thought nothing of it as she could have left, and he took the spot. 3 minutes later, the person changed again. This time he looked like an Indian, a shaved man with long hair and an ear piercing. I never saw the white woman or black man walk out of the cafe, and there was only one exit. I had an unusual encounter with an owl. I love to hear the stories of the owls and the supernatural. I personally believe there's something to it. Let me tell you why. I was raised to believe that the owl is a harbinger of death coming and should be noted and respected as such. I, in turn, convinced my husband and children of the same. One night my husband came home from the shooting range where he competes with a number of other old men with guns. He said it was the strangest thing that in a lull of the shooting a large owl flew right over the heads of all the men. He said that if anything, all wildlife would be miles away from that area with all that noise. I immediately said somebody there is going to die. He didn't laugh but thought it was indeed strange. The next week he goes and comes back early. One of the men, in taking his gun out of the back of his pickup truck, got it snagged on a piece of junk and pulled. The gun went off, taking most of the man's head off. I said, "See. One more quickie. I have a cousin who lives in Columbia, Missouri, right in the almost center of town. Once some years ago their street was visited by an owl hooting every night and sitting in a tree at the dead end where there was a little bit of woods. She told me everyone came to see and hear it because it was so beautiful and rare and their kids had never heard or seen one. Well, it visited for about 5 days, I think, and then one Sunday morning they woke up to find a young woman ended herself from that same tree. She was not known by anyone and was thought to be a student at Columbia University. Since that Sunday, the owl has never returned. Yep, there's something to it. One's a UFO encounter, and the other is a potential haunting. The UFO story. I've seen the same strange things in the sky twice, at roughly 2 a.m. on 2 separate Saturday nights. It was a swarm of orbs that would fade in from the right, glow bright as a satellite, and then fade out to the left, but only in one small patch of sky. I guess they would have to be 10 plus kilometers away, maybe about 10,000 feet up. This went on for 40 minutes. I observed them through my night vision binoculars and could see so many more. Not drones, not Starlink, not birds. The second time I saw them, I was just as shocked as the first time. But now the orbs were coming in from the left, the right, above, and below. All directions, sometimes crisscrossing each other's paths. There were countless orbs, they just seemed to keep fading in and fading out, and I'm sure they would have been going all night long if I stayed out there to watch them long enough. Once again, it was about 2 a.m. I still don't have an explanation, and it freaks me out a little too. I live in a small, remote mining town in outback NSW, where I can see lots of stars on a moonless night. And the haunting story. I once stayed at an antiquated hotel, in a peculiar room featuring a single small window located in the corner that could not be opened, a compact television positioned at the far end of the spacious, empty hotel room, and a bed situated at the opposite end. The only other room was the bathroom, the most claustrophobic room I've ever stayed in, lol. And it was also the one very rare time where something weird happened to me, similar to this. Maybe about 2 hours after I went to bed, the blanket that I had half draped over my shoulder suddenly lifted up with force, like someone just grabbed the corner of the blanket and flicked it up, and it landed further over my shoulder than where it was. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I run the duck out of there? Well, I was tired and comfortable in bed, and I'd be gone in the morning, so unless something weirder than that happened, then I'd be concerned. But nothing did. I was like, okay, that was strange. I remained in place and tried to drift off to sleep before hitting the road the next day. But that was the weirdest thing that happened to me. I never turned over to look when it happened, just in case. My strange experience. So I had something weird happen when I was walking over a bridge in my town that goes through a state park, in Northern California, at like 2:30 to 3 a.m. The area is known to be haunted, as there used to be a lot of cult, satanic and otherwise, activity and animal sacrifices, possibly people too, in the 70s 80s. I'm basically a 15-minute drive from Bohemian Grove as well, so this area has a long history of weirdness. Furthermore, the creek this bridge goes over had a heinous murder by the sheriffs, who killed a tweaker that was selling meth for them and threw him in the creek, I think off the same bridge possibly. So the place has a history of weird shit. The bridge would always creep me the duck out at night, and I would need to smoke a cig to even have the courage to cross it at night. I'm not spooked easily either. I used to do some bad stuff and have been jumped and robbed at gunpoint and knife point before, and nothing was as terrifying as going through this area at night. The trees also grow around the streetlights, so it is dark. Even though it's beautiful and has a completely different vibe during the day, I always felt as though someone was watching me when I went through there at night. This was also around 2012 or so. In this same park/forest there are homeless people who camp sometimes, and they would tell me stories about how large things would move around their tents, often sounding bipedal, sometimes messing with stuff, or sometimes making lots of noise, and when they would run off, the things would cover distance fast in rough terrain. They were always too spooked to look outside and check. Also lots of reports of demons/creatures, those I chalk up to the meth, etc., and don't really hold water. That night, I was crossing the bridge while smoking a cigarette to calm my nerves, as there is always a sense of dread in that area after dark. Then, when I'm halfway over the bridge, there is the loudest metal bang ever, like someone hit the metal supports of the bridge, and literally the entire bridge vibrates under my feet with the reverberation. This is a sturdy concrete bridge with a 2-lane road going over it. No human could do anything to make the entire bridge vibrate and make such a loud bang. I have never been so terrified in my entire life. I sprinted back to my house, covering a distance of about 2 miles, and spent the rest of the night in complete awe. To this day there is no good explanation for what happened. It's just not possible. I went and looked under the bridge in the morning, and everything was totally normal, nothing fell off, and there were no visual clues to what caused it. I'd love for there to be a rational explanation, but what is strong enough to make an entire bridge/road vibrate from hitting it? Anyway, that's my story. I don't even know if a squatch is strong enough to do that to a bridge, but I'd prefer that versus some eldritch horror lingering around after being summoned in the 70s with the intent of terrifying people. When I was a kid, I saw something I have no explanation for. Looking for similar experiences. When I was around 10, I had what I can only really describe as a supernatural experience. To this day, it is the only experience I have had that I truly have no rational explanation for, and in some ways I think it has shaped my mindset and overall perception of reality. I'm not religious and never really have been, although this experience has led me to question the fundamental nature of reality on more than one occasion throughout the years. I'm a naturally curious and inquisitive person and consider myself fairly rational, so I have always made attempts to rationalize or explain this situation in some logical way, but I've determined that to be impossible. First, some context to better explain the events. When this occurred, my little brother had recently been born. He was probably a little less than 6 months old at the time and slept in a crib in my parents' room. At the time, my dad was serving in the Navy and was deployed to sea on a carrier. Now, in order to best understand what occurred, I need to paint a basic picture of the setup of this house. It was a 3-bedroom house, with all 3 bedrooms basically in a back corner of the house. My room was directly next to what would later become my little brother's room, and my parents' room was directly across the hall from my room, so I could see it from my room. My door was open, and the door to my parents' room was almost closed, left slightly cracked open. On this particular night, I was lying in my bed before going to sleep. I would occasionally stay up past my bedtime playing my Game Boy. This was in the pre-backlight days, so you had to use a light or an attachment to see the screen. These were the Pokemon Silver and Gold days for those of you who were around to remember. Anyway, aside from this light, my room was otherwise fairly dark, but I had a small night light that lit a small section of the hallway beyond my room. Since our rooms were tucked into a corner, the main hallway was only partially visible. I could see about 3 to 4 feet down the hall, but beyond that distance, it was obscured by the angle of the wall. So, as I lay in my bed playing Pokemon, I distinctly remember looking down the hall for some reason. I think that I heard a noise, but I can't completely remember. I just know that something drew my attention to the hallway, but due to the angle, I could not see anything past a few feet. As I was looking down the hall, a figure just emerged. Emerged as in walked straight down the hall at a typical human pace. I don't recall the footsteps making any distinct noise, or any noise otherwise, after I actually saw the figure. The figure walked down the few remaining feet of my hallway, walked directly in front of my door, and just stood looking in at me for what was probably 5 to 10 seconds. During this time I was, I think understandably, extremely confused. I don't remember being particularly afraid, but I was very confused and somewhat shocked. I was also curious. I remember wondering what he was. I say he because he had the general shape of a man, though his gender was impossible to discern. This is because he literally had no physical features to speak of. He didn't even have skin. He was just a light bluish form of glowing, somewhat flowing energy. Where his eyes were, I could see past them. The only real comparison I can make is that he almost looked like Dr. Manhattan from The Watchmen, though completely featureless, and the energy that formed his body was actually glowing and flowy, as if the energy that made up his form was not fully stable. I don't actually remember him illuminating his surroundings, although he was clearly glowing. As he stood at my door looking at me, I remember blinking rapidly, like you might do if a light shone into your eyes and you were trying to make the afterimage disappear. I just couldn't actually believe what I was seeing and thought that maybe if I blinked enough, he wouldn't be there on one of the occasions when I opened my eyes. As he watched me, I felt that he seemed almost surprised to realize I could see him. After my rapid blinking and direct stare, he turned away from my door but briefly maintained eye contact with me over his shoulder as he walked back down the hall. He didn't vanish, he didn't glide, and he didn't walk through any walls, he just walked back down the hall and was gone. After this, I remember lying in my bed for a moment. At this point, I was afraid because I felt like I just saw something I shouldn't have and was also considering that maybe some glowing blue person had broken into my house. Looking back, I find it absurd to equate this glowing, clearly inhuman entity with an intruder or burglar. However, at that time, my mindset was that a person in your house equals a burglar. I didn't hear any doors open or any apparent sign of the figure leaving, but I went into my mom's room and woke her up. I told her that I saw a man, though I didn't actually fill her in on the fact that he was glowing until the next morning. My mom thought there might have been an intruder and searched the house but found nothing. She then assumed that I was dreaming, and since I was partly confused and partly concerned with her knowing that I had stayed awake past my bedtime playing Pokemon, I think I agreed with that explanation. After listening to the accounts of what people call shadow people, I've come to describe this as basically the opposite of whatever they are. Where shadow people are, shadows, this being was formed out of what appeared to be pure, flowing light. Almost like it was made completely out of some form of energy. I have considered the possibility that I somehow imagined this or dreamt it up, but I find that difficult to believe at this point, even though I cannot entirely discount the possibility. For one thing, it was a one-off experience. I've never had dreams so vivid, as a child or otherwise, that they led me to question whether I was awake or not. I've never experienced any hallucinations or otherwise strange encounters. And I've only ever had explainable, ordinary experiences. And the main thing that gets me is that my Game Boy was still on next to me when I went back in my room. If I had somehow experienced the one time in my life where I mistook my dreams for reality, I don't think my Game Boy would have still been on and next to my bedside where I remembered putting it while I went to wake my mom. Although I wouldn't really say I was afraid, per se, I was extremely confused. I knew that I was seeing something weird but didn't really know enough about the world to understand exactly why or how. I just knew that it didn't fit with my current understanding of the world. After this event, I did become scared. I was worried that he would come back and watch me or walk back down that hall. I slept in my parents' room for a while after that. I would go into my parents' room and lay my blankets on the floor and sleep on something of a makeshift pallet. To this day, I don't feel very comfortable sleeping with the door open, and I think this event is the likely catalyst for that. Has anyone had a similar experience? I'd be very curious to hear about it if you have, as I have never heard of any paranormal encounter that really matched mine. I don't even know if what I saw would be considered a ghost or not. It felt very much like a conscious presence that was acting with intent and knowledge of its surroundings and seemed very human in terms of its movements. My dad told me this. He was sitting in a patio chair around midnight, smoking a cigarette and looking at the stars. It was a clear night down by the river outside his little house. No wind or clouds. He was just smoking and listening to the summertime crickets and looking skyward. He said an intense light fell from the sky, angled downward. It came from above and behind him. He saw at once it had cleared the roof overhang above him. He said it looked like a miniature comet. A bright, baseball-sized orb glowing a bright white light, with a tail that was a foot long. The tail was white around the orb, slowly fading to yellow at the tip of the tail. In a fraction of a second it hit the ground right in front of him and was just gone. It made no sound and just whizzed past him from the sky into the blacktop driveway. It was pretty dark, so he used his lighter to shine around on the ground where it disappeared into but couldn't see anything. He swears, though, that the spot where it had hit was strange the next morning. There was a slimy, snail trail-like shimmering spiral pattern on the blacktop about the size of the comet-like object. I don't know what that could possibly have been, but he swears it's true. I have seen some wild events in a daytime sky. I saw tic-tac shaped things, around 20 or so, floating around each other. They moved through the air like amoebas on a microscope slide. They did that for a few seconds before completely fading away. Nobody believes either of us, and I don't blame them. Strange ghost lights. Angela Sangster once wrote, "One of my greatest thrills when I was young was listening to ghost stories around the campfire. I remember a popular theme in those stories was tales of seemingly inexplicable lights floating. Lights that were actually spirits from beyond the grave. I am no longer a child, but those tales still fascinate me. They always involved an unrested spirit, usually from the Kickapoo and Illini nations that once roamed the area I live in. In these accounts, the spirit was angry and vengeful, seeking retribution for their burial ground being desecrated. Many of these stories simply recount the sighting of something strange, giving rise to a growing legend over time. However, there are documented cases all over the world of these bizarre light forms. Scientifically, these lights have been shown to be gases coming from the ground or the rarer phenomenon of Earth lights that show up around fault lines. Does this explain all of the sightings? It's quite likely they do. And yet the interest and speculations continue. Ghost lights, origins and legends. Accounts of these strange lights go back to before biblical times, when people felt they were getting a message from God or higher beings. These weren't generally attributed to ghosts. Rather, it was believed that something celestial or divine was at work. In the 10th century AD, his stepmother possibly murdered one of the first English kings, known as Edward the Martyr. A year after his death, a strange orange light, almost resembling a ball of fire, lit up the sky over the area where the body was supposed to be hidden. More recorded sightings appeared throughout the 11th and 12th centuries, especially in Europe. These strange balls of light have come to be known by such phrases as will-o'-the-wisp or corpse candles. Legends of these lights even inspired the creation of the jack-o'-lantern we all enjoy during Halloween. Often, these lights appear as a single entity, but many incidents have been reported where multiple lights are observed. These lights gave rise to speculation not only of ghosts but of extraterrestrials as well. Ghost lights, well-known sightings. Many local legends all over the world have stories about the lights. Some involve a railroad worker who was tragically killed by an oncoming train and now walks the tracks, represented as a bobbing light. Others speak of vengeful spirits from the nations indigenous to the United States. Many reputedly haunted cemeteries and abandoned wastelands also have accounts of these floating orbs. Along with these legends are well-known documented cases of what have come to be known as ghost lights. Nuremberg Incident woodcut. The Nuremberg Incident of 1561 led many to speculate about the possibility of these lights having an extraterrestrial nature. It is said that in early April, spheres of light shot across the atmosphere, along with shapes of cylinders and crosses. As depicted in a woodcut, before photography, a way to record an image by carving it on a block of wood, it appeared there was a celestial battle going on right before the shocked townspeople's eyes. Another early documentation of such a phenomenon occurred in Cardenshire, Wales, in 1656. These lights appeared to have been more of a ghostly nature, as they were round spheres of light that circled in the area of the town and sometimes even inside the homes themselves. A man named John Davis wrote these incidents down as they happened, and there were many superstitions that the balls of light appeared before someone in the town died. Throughout the next several hundred years, accounts of seeing these lights would continue. There were variations, of course. Some were small globes of white seen floating in almost a bobbing fashion, and others were bright orange spheres that appeared ominously in the sky or near the ground. Many of these incidents have gained national attention in the last century. One of the most famous of these would be the Marfa Lights in Texas. The Marfa Lights. If you travel down US Route 67 in the state of Texas, pay special attention when you are close to Mitchell Flat. This area, just to the east of the town of Marfa, is home to many accounts of strange, brightly glowing spheres of light. The lights are reported as either hovering close to the ground or being up higher in the air. While there are no documented cases of such phenomena before an article in 1957, it is said that the stories of the lights had been passed down since the late 19th century. The article, called The Mystery of the Texas Ghost Light, was written by Paul Moran and was featured in Coronet magazine. However, it's important to note one fact about this specific case. When a group of students from a psychic society studied this phenomenon, they found that the traffic from South Highway 67 can be seen from the area where the lights have been reported. It is also noted that the study was conducted southwest of the reported viewing area, which only explains the lights that are seen in that particular spot. Explanations such as extreme temperature changes in this region creating mirages or the thermal expanding and contracting of the quartz in the area causing a voltage effect over time have also been examined. Whether there is a natural explanation or not, the people of Marfa enjoy their notoriety and have the Marfa Lights Festival every year. Project Hestelin. Hestelin Valley lies in the heart of Norway and is home to many sightings of strange lights. These accounts began in the latter part of 1981 and continued through the middle part of the decade. The reports were so numerous that an investigation, called Project Hestelin, was launched in 1983. A studied observation of the phenomenon happened in the early part of 1984. During this, 53 recorded sightings of these lights occurred in a time frame of just over 1 month. Another investigation in the later part of 1985 yielded no recorded results. In 1998, technology came into play, and an automatic measurement station was placed in the Hestelin Valley. This records any data that shows up so that it can be analyzed. There are still sightings of these strange spheres of light in this area, but they have decreased to a little more than a dozen each year. Ghost lights, what science has to say. In the possible explanations for these sightings that seem to occur at random and in all different areas of the world, logic and reasoning must be applied. Some of these lights can be attributed to simple gases that come from the ground, especially in damp or marshy areas. Phosphine and methane naturally occur in ground that is decaying from the inside. When these gases come in contact with the air, their appearance can be that of a glow or a shimmer, often appearing in spherical form. In 1993, Drs. J.S. Dare and M.A. Persinger, two professors, took a book written by Paul Devereux in 1982 called Earth Lights a Step Further. The tectonic strain theory offers that the Earth itself holds the explanation to these lights. Minerals such as quartz or arsenic that occur naturally in the ground produce an electrical charge. This is noted especially along fault lines. When these strains occur, rocks and soil increase in temperature, turning any water into vapor. If the heated area contains any of these minerals that produce electricity, it is thought that the charge itself could move through the vaporized water, causing a ball of light to appear. Other explanations vary from types of biological fungus from the ground that emit a glow, to ball lightning occurrences, to simple light reflections that optically appear to be coming from another location. The Paulding Lights of Michigan, another well-known case, are thought by some to be reflections of headlights from the nearby highway. We have learned a lot about the causes of this strange phenomenon. However, witnessing these lights never diminishes their fascination or interest. Many have been explained. A few are still puzzling those who study them. One thing is for certain. The Earth is full of mysteries that we are only beginning to comprehend. I have a few, but this one is the one that I cannot explain away. I was in the shower at 6 a.m., getting ready for work. I shampooed my hair and went to put the bottle back on the corner shelf thingy in the shower, and it wouldn't go. You know that feeling when you try and push two magnets together, the force that pushes back and, if you're not careful, to the side? It was like that. I paused and looked at the bottle on the shelf. Felt it. Feel the shelf. Tried again. No go. I tried another shelf, and it went easy peasy. I tried the original spot again. Nope. So I started pushing as hard as I could. I braced myself with my foot, and it gave way enough that I could place it on the shelf. I let go, and it flew across the bathroom and hit the wall so hard it broke the cap on the bottle. That's when I decided I was freaked out. Until that moment, I'd just been thinking, it's just something catching on. I ran out of the bathroom screaming for my husband, who then went into the bathroom to try and see if he could get it to happen for him. But it didn't. He was disappointed since he really wants to experience something and won't believe until he does. Anyways, it shook me up a lot. I went to work sort of in shock. I almost told my boss several times during the day but couldn't get the words to come out of my mouth. I thought, he'll just think I'm a nut. And it was so weird to be so freaked out and have to keep it all inside. I recall thinking that this is the reason why individuals hesitate to come forward when strange occurrences take place. Paranormal encounters in one day or a sign from the universe? I swear I saw my 1 to 2-year-old niece in her bed. It was 5:40 a.m., and I was going to shower before work, and I noticed the kid's door wide open. It is usually left closed or barely open. I felt drawn to check on my niece, but I know if one of the kids, there are 2 of them, is sleeping at their grandparents or cousins, the other one left behind with us usually sleeps with my sister and her boyfriend. I assumed the door was open so they could have quick access to run to her if something happens. I stepped out in the doorway and squinted to see if she was there. Their bed sheets are white, with tiny black dots and with blankets, and I wasn't sure if it was a blanket or my niece. I stepped away but needed to double check, so I returned to the doorway and moved a bit closer, though I never entered the room for fear of waking her up. They have one of those sensor nightlights that is dim, and then I saw my niece lying there, blinking, and then she just sat up, was lying on her belly facing me, but the way she sat up wasn't the usual lifting herself up with her arm, she literally swung her body to sit up, which was kind of weird. I think she blinked a few times to wake up fully, and she has done this thing rarely where she lies in bed awake from sleep just waiting for someone and then cries when someone is present. But she just stared at me. She was wearing her white long-sleeved PJ top with the black flowers and was in diapers. She didn't cry and didn't reach her arms out to me. It could be because of the lighting and my terrible eyesight and imagination, but her face looked distorted or weird. When I saw her, I exclaimed, "Oh shit," and quickly went to the shower because I was scared, but I also didn't want to wake her up and face her scolding. I showered for about 10 minutes or so and heard thumps and a door close and maybe a baby voice. So I assumed my sister or her boyfriend saw her on the baby monitor and took her in their room. After I showered, I checked again, and I literally only saw the blanket, the same way it was when I saw her, and nothing else. Maybe she moved to a position that was out of view, but I distinctly remember not seeing her at all. I got ready and left for work. I had a great Monday, and then suddenly on the drive home, my engine just died at a red stoplight as I braked. Mind you, this happened 3 times as I was leaving work. The lights and everything in the car were working fine. The car literally won't budge. The people behind me honked and cursed at me, so I fiddled with the car until it finally moved again. I came home, had my sister's BF check it out, and we drove, trying to replicate what happened so he could figure out the issue, but it literally never happened. I also called him when I got stuck, but it went to voicemail with him babbling like blueble after the beep. I figured it was something he'd said as his voicemail and laughed. He answered on the second try after I called my sister, and apparently he said he had never set up his voicemail. We checked, and nothing. The missed call appears in my phone history, but it does not appear in his. It could just be a fluke, but it's weird. Anyway, I asked them about my niece, and they said my sister was awake from 5 a.m., and she never saw my niece sit up or wake up on the baby monitor, and she never made a sound either. And that she was right in her bed the entire time until she tried to go to their room around 7 a.m. when they were both awake. I asked if they had changed her to PJs, and they said she was still wearing her same clothes from yesterday, which were a strawberry dress and blue denim overalls. Their eyes widened when I told them about her long-sleeved white outfit with flowers that I saw her wearing, and they never came out to check on her, when I heard the thump while showering, and never heard her talk or cry. All these things happened in a single day, and I can't wrap my head around it. They think I'm crazy, lol, because the car doesn't replicate what happened to me. I saw my niece and the voicemail. We immediately smudged the house, though. My niece has been known to wave hi randomly to the air, but I assumed it's just her saying hi. Occasionally she'll look in the hallway, their room is at the end, or she'll cry about being in the room. Sometimes she looks in that direction and repeatedly says no, which she only does when someone is actually speaking to her, not at random. Her 5-year-old brother is the same, he gets scared in the room. I get off vibes from their room too. The nightlight suddenly turned red, it changes color if touched, while I was in their room at night with the 2 kids, and nothing else nearby could have triggered it. I have also heard a baby crying as if waking up from sleep when I was alone with my niece. She was napping, so I quickly ran to her, but she didn't appear to have cried in her sleep at all. I was only a few steps away and would have seen her pout, rub her eyes, or move. Their room literally makes me feel so uneasy, and there was even a time that a ball had bounced. Stereotypical, I know, but when I went to check the room, it hadn't moved from the shelf it was on. I do encounter stuff like hearing my sister call my name loudly and clearly, but she never did. Sometimes I'm hella afraid to answer my nephew's voice when I'm in the bathroom or room in case it's not really him. I now believe that my car stalling was a sign from the universe or something similar. Either that or I pissed some spirit off. A terrifying incident occurred on an isolated road. Happened to me in 1991, when I was 16. At the time, neither cell phones nor GPS was available. I'm 50 years old now, and it still sticks with me today. I had just gotten my first car, and I was only allowed to drive around my city. I was inexperienced and somewhat sheltered. But I got the bright idea to sneak and drive to UCI to visit my boyfriend, about 45 minutes from my house. Unfortunately, on my way home I took the wrong freeway. I was lost. Once I realized that, I took the first exit, Bonita Sin Road, to search for a place to call for help. There was nothing but open land and winding hills. That part of Irvine hasn't been developed yet. Anyway, I finally found a supermarket that was being built. There was nobody anywhere around, and it was getting dark. But the supermarket had a payphone, so I parked right in front of the phone to call my boyfriend. This is when things get very weird. I get to the payphone and see a disheveled, dirty, large man walking towards me. I don't know where he came from. There were no other cars or people around. I would normally say hi and ask for directions. But the closer he got, the more fear I felt. I had this guttural, instinctual fear of him. He comes closer and leans against the hood of my car, arms folded, and just glares at me. He was maybe 5 feet away. He stared so intensely at me without saying a word. I began crying as I waited for my BF to answer my call. For what feels like forever, I just froze, afraid to speak. I tried to imagine running to the passenger side of my car but knew he could grab me before I could get there. He was leaning on my car. I was too afraid that if I told my BF about him, that's when he would grab me. The man seemed to enjoy my fear. I had such an overwhelming feeling I was in danger. Never in my life before or after have I had that kind of fear of someone. I felt like I was in the presence of evil. I can't quite explain it. I knew this man was going to do something awful to me. Then the strangest thing happened. Another man approaches from behind the empty supermarket and walks towards us. I swear he looked like Jesus. I'm not religious, I do believe in a higher power. I know how weird this sounds, but it's true. Then he looked at me and said, "You're going to be okay." He didn't say anything else. He looked at the man leaning against my car, and for whatever reason, it made the man walk away. They both left and went in 2 different directions. Neither man said anything else. The man who was scaring me never said a word to me. He was enjoying my fear. The second man, who looked like Jesus, also just walked away. They didn't say a word to each other. Nothing about this encounter was normal. The man who looked at me and said nothing but "you're going to be okay" didn't ask me what was wrong or if I needed help. But he seemed to understand what was going on. He never spoke to the man that was terrifying me. They just walked off in different directions. Looking back, it's surreal. When they walked off, I was able to tell my BF where I was. He got there fast. The 2 men were nowhere to be found. I knew in my gut that I escaped something awful. I've often wondered about that experience and if I had a guardian angel. I can't explain it. I'd love your thoughts on this. Or if anybody else has had a strange encounter they can't explain. Don't be scared. 10 very strange humanoid encounters. One of the most extraordinary experiences a person can have is meeting an extraterrestrial humanoid face to face. And yet it happens more often than you might think. There are tens of thousands of documented cases, reaching back well over 100 years and coming from all over the world. These involve a wide variety of humanoid creatures. This compilation presents 10 fascinating and little-known cases, each of which adds to our knowledge of the extraterrestrial presence on our planet. 1. I beheld an incredible thing. Francesco Rizzi, a security guard for a large textile factory in the heart of Milan, Italy, had always been skeptical of UFOs and aliens, but on the evening of December 17, 1962, his mind was changed forever. Hearing a swishing noise, he looked up and saw a flying saucer with portholes swoop down and hover a few feet above the ground a short distance away from him. Immobilized with fear, he was unable to move as a hatch opened, and a short humanoid emerged. It was dressed in a glowing jumpsuit and dark helmet. The humanoid gestured for Francesco to approach. Before Francesco could react, another humanoid came out and motioned for the first one to return to the craft. The 2 beings crawled back inside the saucer, which promptly took off. Francesco called the police, but by then the UFO was gone. He did learn that others had seen the UFO in the sky. As a result of the encounter, Francesco was fired from his job. 2. A nice little man. Starting in October 1965, Thousands of people in the city of Mogi Guaçu, Sao Paulo, Brazil, reported seeing UFOs maneuvering overhead. Over the next month, the sightings continued, and a few witnesses saw the craft land on the ground, humanoids emerge, and samples collected. But it was on the farm of Dario Filho, outside of town, that the most amazing events occurred. The UFOs seemed to target the farm, with sightings occurring on an almost nightly basis. Craft would follow their cars home to the farm. Then, on November 11, 1965, Lucia Filho and her grandson were drawn outside by another UFO, only this time, it landed in their cattle pen. Short humanoids, dressed in jumpsuits, emerged and started collecting samples of vegetation, which they then carried into the craft. The next day, the owner of the farm, Dario Filho, went to town and implored his friends to come and watch the activity. On November 13, a crowd of people, including police officers, saw the UFO land and a humanoid emerge and walk around, then go back into the craft, which took off. Meanwhile, sightings continued over the nearby city. 3. I will deny it. October 1968. After attending a youth church meeting, Suzanne and her younger sister and another high school student allowed their pastor to drive them to their homes in Litchfield, South Dakota. As they drove along a remote highway just outside of Hastings, a gray metallic, disc-shaped craft emerged from behind some trees and began to pace their car. It had colored lights around the edge and large luminous portholes. Through the portholes, Suzanne and her sister were amazed to see skinny, gray-skinned figures with dark eyes and large heads staring down at them. They told the pastor and the girl in the front seat, but both refused to look or acknowledge the existence of the craft. The UFO followed the car for several miles before darting away. The girl in the front refused to discuss it, and the pastor ordered the sisters not to talk about it in his presence, or he would deny it. 4. No satisfactory explanation. On the night of October 1, 1975, Takeshi Furuya and Michio Hikawa decided to drive up to a parking lot in the foothills of the beautiful Southern Alps near their home in Hakushu, Osaka, Japan. Shortly after they parked the car, one of the young men saw 3-foot-tall, strange-looking humanoids dressed in white outside the car. The other man could not see them. But suddenly, a strange force pulled their car backward several feet. Then it happened again, and then a third time. Now panicked, they drove back to town and alerted their friends. None of their friends would return, so the two young men drove back alone. Once again, their car was inexplicably pulled by a weird force. They returned home, only to discover that the car was no longer working properly. 5. Don't be scared. David was only 7 years old when, one night in winter 1975, he had an encounter in the bedroom of his home in Plattsmouth, Nebraska, that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He woke up to sense a presence, and turning around in his top bunk bed, he saw a strange, shadowed face looking at him. He'd never heard of gray aliens and wondered if it might be a vampire like Dracula. After it left, David jumped down to the lower bunk and woke his brother. And moments later, both of them saw the same creature peer around the open doorway into the bedroom. Years later, David saw images of gray aliens and recognized them as the creature he had observed in his bedroom as a child. 6. Did you see what I just saw? It was a bright, sunny morning in May 1976 as two men from Valdez, Alaska, decided to take a short drive out of town. Almost immediately upon reaching the edge of the town, they saw an incredible sight, a large, shiny, metallic, disc-shaped craft with rotating lights around the perimeter sitting off the highway a few hundred feet away. To their amazement, a ramp stretched out to the ground, and two short aliens emerged and began to walk around with a sense of urgency. Realizing what they had just seen, the men turned the car around to get a closer look, but by this time, all signs of the craft and humanoids were gone. One of the men later refused to discuss the incident and then said that he didn't even remember it. 7. Not of this world. Rafael Peralta was a world-famous bullfighter when, on the night of July 25, 1982, he had a wonderful run-in with a landed UFO and a humanoid. He was driving along a coastal highway outside of Punta Umbria, Spain. He assumed that there must have been a vehicle accident, so he stopped his car and got out to help. Incredibly, it was not an accident at all but a landed flying saucer. A 7-foot-tall silver humanoid stood in front of the craft, facing Raphael. The creature seemed to grunt a few words at Raphael, who couldn't understand what was being said. Moments later, the being turned around and walked back into the craft, which rose upwards and darted off. Raphael rushed home and told his astonished wife. Both returned to the site the next day and found no evidence of the landing, but they learned that several people in the area had seen UFOs. Raphael tried to keep the encounter a secret but did tell a friend, who leaked the story out to newspaper reporters. 8. I continue to wonder. On the evening of October 27, 2010, Carlos was sleeping in his apartment home in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when bright colored lights coming from outside illuminated his bedroom. He woke up to see a large boomerang-shaped craft hovering in the sky a short distance away. He wanted to investigate but found himself overcome with sleepiness. He was unable to keep his eyes open when he suddenly felt a telepathic link with gray ETs, who he sensed were entering his apartment. He felt an impulse to go to the bathroom, and although he didn't do anything unusual, he could feel the presence of the Greys watching him. Again he was overcome with sleepiness, and unable to fight it, he went back to bed. Later, he woke up suddenly to see a gray alien staring at him studiously from the balcony window. Again, Carlos was forced to close his eyes. He forced them open just in time to watch an orb leave his room, attach itself to the boomerang-shaped object hovering outside his apartment, and see the craft dart away. 9. A creature in our home. Emma rarely had dreams, but on the evening of October 22, 2015, she had a dream unlike any she'd ever had before. In the dream, she found herself in her dining room looking at a gray alien crouched under the table. It had a large head, large dark eyes, and skin like a shark and appeared to be angry that it was being observed. Without warning, Emma heard a loud crashing noise and found herself waking up in bed with her husband. He ran from the bedroom into the dining room, followed by Emma, and they were both amazed to see that one of their tables had been smashed, 2 of its legs were snapped off, and the contents of the table were strewn on the floor. Weirdly, it was right under the dining room table. Checking the house, they found all the doors and windows locked as normal, but their alarm system had malfunctioned, which it had never done before. Looking outside, they both saw 2 glowing orbs a short distance away. Ken, I felt I was being tagged. Chris was upset. He had gone through a recent divorce and on October 6, 2023, decided to take a drive near his home in Olympia, Washington. He parked on a small bridge to vent his anger when suddenly a strange electric force swept over him. Looking up, he was amazed to see a small round craft with a transparent dome, and inside it was a small gray alien looking down at him. A short distance away and a little further up, there was another craft with 2 gray aliens. Chris felt a telepathic link with the ETs and felt they were observing his emotional reaction. They quickly darted away. Since then, Chris still feels the presence of the ETs and thinks they are tracking him. As governments across the world are now admitting to the reality of the extraterrestrial presence on our planet, this subject is finally going mainstream. The worldwide UFO cover-up is collapsing under the weight of its lies. There are too many cases to explain away as hoaxes, hallucinations, misperceptions, or mental illness. This subject has the potential to change the way humanity views itself in the universe and teach us volumes about life beyond Earth and life on our own planet. It is time for the truth to come out. We are being visited by extraterrestrials. I heard this story from an old friend, someone who has never believed in ghosts and thought I was stupid for believing in that stuff. However, despite his severe skepticism, he admitted that there was one moment in his life that he can't explain, and he would have written it off as a hallucination were it not for his older brother and cousin being there as well. My friend was about 9 years old and was playing with his brother and their cousin in their cousin's basement. They were throwing darts at an antique dartboard the cousin's dad had bought from an old bar that closed down. The dartboard was in great condition and had barely been used. It was housed in a wooden floating cabinet, and on top of the cabinet was a large wooden sculpture depicting the face of a traditional-looking Native American Indian, whose eyes were made of glass, which made the face appear very realistic. As they were playing their game, they suddenly froze upon hearing a loud, elderly male voice coming from the corner near the dartboard. The event occurred so suddenly that they genuinely couldn't determine what the voice was saying or where it originated. After a minute of standing there confused, they continued throwing darts until they saw movement and heard the voice shout, "What are you doing that for? Stop that." And it was then they realized the movement they saw was the sculpture's head turning towards them as its face contorted into a vicious angry look as it was yelling at them. They immediately shat their britches and ran upstairs crying and telling the adults what happened, and the only person who believed them was my friend's mom, as she knew her kids only cried when something serious happened. She went downstairs herself, and she swears up and down that when she reached the bottom landing of the stairs and turned to look at the dartboard, she realized the face was turned directly towards her, and she says its eyes felt so real that she couldn't help but feel watched by its gaze. Of course, no one believed her. However, to this day, she and the boys still insist on what they saw, which has since become an urban legend in his family. So yeah, a shouting dartboard. Strange anomalies. Unusual experiences have been recorded throughout history. Many are recorded through subjective experience and may even account for religious experiences. A few of my favorites range from disembodied voices of strange entities and unexplained phenomena such as the hairy hands of Dartmoor, watergeists, the miracle of the sun, and even cryptid sightings. There are so many well-documented accounts that they can't all be false, but they seem so strange that they can't be true. I'll share my own, and first paranormal experience, that's haunted my memories for years. My father was driving me and my mother home late after visiting my grandparents. We got held up in traffic before taking a quicker route through a massive area of wilderness. There were miles upon miles of nothing but sheep and road, with no lights, houses, or even trees, just a vast expanse of barren land. I remember incredibly clearly looking out of the rearview window and seeing the road barely illuminated by the moon. Then something absolutely baffling happened. I saw what I described as a little man emerge from the side of the road, then another from the opposite side. It was so dark I couldn't make out facial details, clothing, or anything of significance, only that they had bulbous heads and were of a smaller frame. I absolutely apologize to any beings I insulted with that description. It seems throughout my life I've had weird experiences such as that. I remember vividly seeing a droid from Star Wars. I was in my kitchen when I was a child, and it scared the shit out of me. Maybe our brains hallucinate more than we think. On top of that, I've seen other entities such as a shadow person, orbs, a ghost hand, and other weird stuff. I've always experienced some of these events with other people. It makes me wonder how many people genuinely have seen something, but it was a hallucination? Have you guys experienced anything spooky? About a month ago, I was visiting a friend in Indianapolis. One day, I was riding in a car with her and her husband. It was afternoon, and we were driving west to the airport. On the way there, her husband suggested we play a silly game where we have to guess the type of person driving the vehicle ahead of us. We were making fun of our stereotypes of others. We came up behind an older blue Versa, and we all made our assumptions about what the driver looks like. As we passed them, we saw that the driver was the complete opposite of what any of us guessed, so we all had a good laugh about it. Later that day, my friend and I went to the park, and we noticed a little boy wearing a unique t-shirt. My friend pointed it out, and we laughed about it. So, those were the two separate incidents, the unlikely Versa driver and the little boy's unique t-shirt. The next day, the three of us went to brunch. We drove south/SE. On the way there, I noticed a car in front of us that looked really familiar. I asked, "Is that the Versa we saw yesterday?" My friend's husband was like, "Nah, surely not," I said. "Let's pass it and see," because I could see the driver's hair, and it looked really similar to the driver from the day before. We also noticed the license plate was similar because of its repeating numbers. So he sped up, past the Versa, and lo and behold, it was the same damn person as the day before. We were all quite shocked by the unlikely coincidence. It was a different highway, a different direction, and a different time of day in a large city. We all felt like we experienced a bit of a glitch. Also, as we continued driving, my friend mentioned to her husband the little kid we had seen the day before who was wearing the unique t-shirt. When we arrived at our brunch destination, we had to wait for our table, so we sat outside for a while. There was a family hanging out near us, and there was a little boy wearing the exact same t-shirt that the other boy was wearing the day before. It was not the same boy, but he was the same age and similar in appearance. This instance isn't as shocking as the Versa driver, but because we noted it the day before, talked about it on the way to brunch, etc. I thought it was very strange to see it again, especially after the thing that just happened with the Versa. So, we had pretty much the same exact experiences 2 days in a row. In separate locations, times, etc. I just think it's funny and strange because everything had to line up exactly right on the second day for us to run into the same experiences again. Especially that person in the blue Versa. What are the odds that we would see him again? Especially since he was so notable to us the day before during our game. I've lived in Peterborough and been night fishing offshore for years all over town. I must admit, I'm not particularly interested in the paranormal. While it interests me, and it's kind of fun to indulge the odd time, I don't really believe in anything. I did have 2 strange experiences in one particular spot. Along the Trent-Severn waterway. The bridge that goes across it at Park Hill. Walk south of it. On the left-hand side you will notice a path going down that leads to another runoff pond/earth dam thing. There is a second path further down, also on the left, where the river channel itself opens up into a little bay. The river is on your right. I spent several nights out there fishing in the dark. I only pop my headlamp on when I have a hit or am changing baits. Often will go an hour or 2 without really moving or turning the light on/making any real sound. Obviously, teenagers and townies party down that path, as evidenced by the garbage and fire pits spread through the area, so the weird experience could be somehow explained away, but it did happen twice, each time a year apart. I'll preface it with the fact that the whole path is rocks and gravel. If you maybe took your shoes off and walked lightly, You could do it silently for sure. The bank itself is really sharp rocks, so, not so much. You can generally hear anyone coming at least 100 to 200 meters away. Both times, I had been there for an hour or two already. We were roughly between 12 a.m. and 1 p.m. First time, people had been walking by through the night, usually solo or with one or two other people coming back from bars or what have you. Giggling and making noise, generally walking by without seeing me as it's pitch black and I'm off the bank of the path. Two drunk guys noticed me and started a conversation about whether I had caught anything. Friendly chat, and they were on their way. About an hour later I'd been feeling like someone was watching me for a while. Maybe the previous guys who walked by had nefarious plans, or maybe a house nearby had someone looking off their stoop, or maybe just nothing, but all of a sudden, over my shoulder and quite loudly I hear, "Catch anything?" in a booming but friendly sounding voice. I swung around, as it startled me, but nothing. Nobody. There were no sounds to be heard anywhere. No people anywhere. Especially not within a few feet of me. I heard no sounds from the woods indicating the presence of partiers or other people, as my first instinct was that a random guy had wandered up the dirt path instead of the gravel one and might have snuck up on me. But, nothing. I froze for about 5 minutes just scanning the darkness with my eyes and ears, but nothing happened. Just nothing. Shook it off, stayed a while longer, and headed out. Nothing else strange apart from some eerie feelings and a few of those why does the broken street light suddenly start working as I get close moments on the way back to my car. Always hated that. The second one was almost the same, with the exception that nobody had walked by that night, as it was midweek. And the voice, again, over my shoulder and not the same but similar sounding, said something that this time I couldn't make out. I remember the voice being vaguely aggressive despite not making it out. I just had the feeling to leave and did so pretty much immediately. Noped out, if you will. I felt chills from the strange streetlights, and then I was back at my car, driving home again unscathed. Never really had any other strange experiences like that. I would have been 28 or 29 and sober at the time as well. I have no history of mental health issues, aside from the occasional anxious day. There was nothing noteworthy to report in that regard. I don't attribute it to anything specific, I prefer to attribute it to my mind's ability to deceive me in the dark. Anyone who has hiked or spent a lot of time in fairly pitch black circumstances knows even a sound mind can run a bit wild. Even if there is a little moonlight. That channel, while being worked on a lot, is old. Very old. It's a historic part of Ontario's history. I'd try spending time along it in different spots and just see what happens. Be safe, though. Be smart. Going anywhere alone at night can be dangerous. Not just for the jaded bad people reasons, but 1,000,001 things can go wrong in the dark. Be safe if you're exploring, friend. I had one recently. I live in a rural part of the USA. There is an abundance of farmland scattered between the houses. I have 3 neighbors in a 5-mile radius. We all own land. It's very spread out. The land in front of mine has this massive steel-barred fence post and chicken wire style fence that gets smaller the further down you go. They sit on about 500 acres. Might be more, but that's a ballpark. Now a normal fence has 1 metal pole and anywhere from 3 to 5 barbed wires going across it. This normal fencing alone would cost more than $500,000 to install. Then you think about the type of fence my neighbor has, it's likely almost a $500,000 fence. Maybe more. It has no cattle. It's not farmland. And there are about 5 houses on the property. People live there. I've asked other neighbors, but no one seems to know what happens over there. All my years living here, I've never run into anyone on that land to chat with. I've lived in my current house 11 years. Every year I'm here, I swear there is something more and more strange going on over that land. Anytime a storm comes through and a part of the fence is damaged, there is a person on site, in a gator with all the tools, there to fix the fence immediately. I'm talking within an hour of the storm passing, day or night. This was the first red flag. Since there are no cattle, how are they able to fix the fence so quickly? How do you get the info to fix it? After working late and driving through a storm, I came home around 2 a.m. and saw people repairing the downed fence on the dirt road where I live. It's ducking 2 a.m. Most responsible farmers wouldn't even realize their fence was damaged until a few days later, unless a cow escapes or a neighbor informs them. It's like they have a keen eye to keep the fence in tip-top shape. To set this up, the left neighbor's house is to the left of me on the road. The land in question, which is located in front of my property, will be on the right side of me as I face the road. A few weeks ago I was going on my normal walk to get some exercise down the road I live on. A mile or so down the road a dually truck passes me and for some reason is just going slow. Slow. They are ahead of me by approximately half a football field, yet they are essentially maintaining the same pace as I walk. I couldn't tell what they were doing. I just kept walking. Could be on a phone call for all I know, it's the middle of nowhere. So I keep walking. A few minutes later I see the brake lights light up and the door swings open. A guy gets out and is staring off onto my left neighbor's land. I know he isn't supposed to be there, I know my left neighbor really well. The guy from the truck picks up a rock and throws it at something on the land. I'm thinking, WTF are you doing? He picks up a few more rocks and is throwing them at something on the left neighbor's land with intent and precision. He was trying to hit something, then he just stops, looks up at me, and gets back in his truck and takes off. I brushed it off honestly. This is the country. Maybe he saw one of the many animals and was seeing how they acted. Maybe even a poacher. I keep walking. As I walk, I can see that the land in front of me is on my right side. I can see through this ginormous fence. Trees, land, animals. But it was strange. I saw a group of 10 deer, but they were all young deer. In all my years of hunting and living out in the country, I've never seen a group of young deer like that without any older parental or protective deer around it in some way. They were running around on their own. This was very strange to see. The further I walk, the more I start noticing the sounds of trucks and motor vehicles off to the right side of me. Notably, the four-wheeler. Where I'm walking now, I can't see past the fence. It's blocked by overgrowth, trees, and just general bush. But I can hear things perfectly fine. Out here in the country, sound travels really well. So as I'm walking, I hear doors closing, people shouting positions, and people running. And then I hear this crazy scream I've never heard before in my life. It was a scream of an animal of some kind. It wasn't a death gurgle either. It was the sound of something being captured. I'll never forget the scream. The best way I could describe it was an ape-like scream. It filled the air and triggered a sense of unease just hearing it. Then everyone gets back into their vehicles and drives off. All of this combined made me come to the conclusion they were looking for something. The guy in the truck must have been checking outside their land to ensure that whatever it was didn't get out, but I don't know what it was. I tell real-life friends that if I ever go missing suddenly, the land in front of me has something to do with it. My cousin was found injured at 1 a.m. with no memory of what happened to him, trying to make sense of this. Recently, my cousin experienced a strange incident, and while his mental health could partially explain it, some aspects of it remain unaccounted for. This happened on Monday night. My cousin is in his late 30s and lives with our grandma, along with his family. Some backstory on him is that he was enlisted into the military in his early 30s, the Navy. He was doing really well until he wasn't. He got discharged for mental health issues. He has been diagnosed with a mental illness, likely schizophrenia or BPD, but he was doing relatively okay when I saw him earlier that day. Nothing seemed off or unusual. He has his moments, but mostly he's the same silly guy we grew up with. I'm not sure if he's on medication. I want to say yes, but I don't know all those details. Around 1 a.m. that night, he left the house and said he was walking to a 24-hour grocery store 2.8 miles away. Apple Maps is saying about an hour to walk. He has no car, my grandma lets him borrow hers occasionally, but definitely not at that time lol. The store is just a couple of miles away, on a main street. The town we live in is mostly suburban with some ranch-style homes with dirt roads, but mainly suburbs. Sometime later, he was found along that route by a couple of off-duty firemen. He had scratches on his back, and his ear was severely injured, possibly partially torn, since we've been told a surgeon needs to fix it. He had no idea what happened to him. He didn't appear to have been involved in any type of accident, such as a car hit. I believe the police and firemen would be suspicious if the scene resembled a hit and run. And no explanation has been provided for the injuries. He says he doesn't remember anything between leaving the house and being found. I assume there is just a total blank space in his memory regarding the time when the accident occurred. I know schizophrenia can cause dissociation or confusion, but this situation feels different. It's not like he wandered into the woods or had a history of disappearing. And the fact that he got hurt this badly but with no memory and in a short, familiar distance, it's got all of us wondering what really happened. We've considered everything from a possible assault to some kind of accident, but nothing fits perfectly. And honestly, there's a weird part of me that wonders if it was something else, something harder to explain. If anyone has heard of anything similar, missing time, unexplained injuries, memory loss during night walks, especially in town areas, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm not claiming anything paranormal for sure, but I'm not ruling it out either. I experienced paranormal encounters when I was a kid, not seeing but physically feeling and hearing things and experiencing vivid dreams. So I am very open to possibilities, but I'm also very logical, as are most of my family. My lifetime night terror. This is an incredibly infrequent but terrifying thing that I have experienced since I was around second grade. I am a junior in high school now. I used to live in a house built during the turn of the century, around 1900, and it was incredibly creaky and old. In the middle of my sister's room and mine was a bathroom, with doors on either side leading to the two rooms. It was essentially a shared ensuite. This will be relevant later. Around second grade, but I am not sure exactly when, I have an incredibly vivid memory that my parents have backed up. I woke up in the dead of night, somehow sitting up in my bed with no blankets on. This is clearly unusual, but I guess possible. I then felt an extremely strong force push down on my chest, putting me back lying down in my bed. Being a second grader, I did the only thing I knew to do and ran down to my parents' bedroom. This was a 2-story house, and my parents slept in the basement while I was on the ground floor. As I ran through our living room, something violently hit my shin, causing me to trip. It felt like a solid, hard, perhaps wooden or metal object. I got back up and ran back down to my parents' room, now screaming. I got there and was comforted and put back to sleep in the guest bedroom. The next morning, I told my parents everything that had happened to me, and they did not believe me until they saw the now visible bruise on my shin from when I hit, or was hit by, something in the living room. However, upon looking in the living room, there was nothing there that could have tripped me. Sure, we had couches, a table, and a TV, but they were all on the side and vastly different from what I had felt. I hit only my shin, and had I hit any of those, I would have run into the rest of the object with my head or body. After hearing of this, my grandma bought me a Native American dream catcher and a small rock carving of a turtle, which she calls a spirit animal, which she said protected me from scary things in the night. All of this was very strange but ultimately forgettable. Time passes, and I have that dream catcher and turtle on my dresser all through my elementary days. That is until, at the beginning of middle school, my family begins the process of moving to Australia. The university that my dad taught at had a sister relationship with this Australian university, and as his contract at the current one was coming to an end, we decided to make the move. During the process of moving, I was spending a lot of time with my grandparents, who lived about an hour away. One night my grandma and I get to talking about ghosts after watching a TV show about them together. Keep in mind my grandma has a Native American background. She tells me some information that I could never expect. She says that she believes in spirits, which at the time was not something I was familiar with, and that she believes that there is a spirit living in my house. She said that my mom doesn't want me to know this, but a woman died via natural causes in the bathroom next to my room sometime around 1935. My grandma claims that she can feel her presence there, but roughly 11-year-old me thinks she is just trying to scare me. A few days later, I ask my mom if it is true, if someone did die in the room next to mine, and she confirms this and says that she didn't really want me to find it so I wouldn't be scared, but she is comfortable telling me now that we are moving soon. Now I was convinced it was the ghost of this woman that did whatever happened to me that night in second grade, but little did I know my real paranormal experiences had yet to begin. After moving to Australia, my family settled into a nice-sized beachside rental for 3 months while we awaited the arrival of our shipping container with all of our furniture. Keep in mind, I no longer have the dreamcatcher or rock turtle, as they were left back in the States. A few nights in, I am woken up in the middle of the night by an incredibly loud bang. Frozen with fear, I suddenly feel pressure pulling me up to a sitting position. An unmistakable, terrible feeling, the same one that came into contact with me twice on that fateful night in second grade. It feels as though the devil is touching you himself, with such force and anger, yet it remains remarkably painless. Again, I run to my parents' room, and I am calmly put back to sleep. A few months pass, and we finally move into our brand new house in Australia. It is small, cozy, and modern. A good step forward from our creaky old house in the States. A few weeks after we have moved in with all our stuff, I am sound asleep in my new bedroom, feeling better than ever. I have made new friends in my neighborhood. I finally live in a house built after 2000, we just got a new dog, and life seems good. That is when I wake to find myself standing upright right next to my bed. The next thing that happened will haunt me forever. I hear my name, same, whispered into my left ear by the voice of a youngish yet tired-sounding woman. Not only that, but I could feel the breath on my neck as if she were right there. The voice was relaxed and not in the usual horror style, as if someone was trying to get my attention in a library. Cut to me crying violently, incoherently trying to explain to my parents what had happened. Again I am put to sleep, but now I am scared. Very scared. I beg my mom to buy me another dreamcatcher, and she orders a cheap one off of the internet. I am satisfied, but I still want my old one back, or at least one from my grandma. Just 2 months later, my grandma passed from a long battle with kidney cancer. Of course I am devastated, but on top of that I feel more unsafe than ever. I felt as though her knowledge of spirits was the only thing that could protect me from this evil thing, and I was now alone and vulnerable. Cut to 8th grade, and this cheap dreamcatcher has done nothing for me. I had one mild midnight terror, where I was awakened and sat up, but I was able to get back to sleep on my own. I have also had terrible nightmares over the past few months, and I knew I needed my genuine Native American spirit protectors back. In late 8th and 9th grade, I had 2 more experiences. However, now, I had a phone, and I looked at it after both. The time that I found myself being awoken sitting up was 2:27 a.m. Both freaking times. I leave this to mere coincidence, and the next month we are going on a huge trip home to the US, so I'm looking forward to finding my original dreamcatcher. Once home, I find not only my dreamcatcher but also a massive collection of spirit animals my grandma had planned to gift to me. All in all, there are about 25. I am over the moon and very confident I will be safe now. And that I never experienced anything for over 3 years with the spirit animals and dreamcatcher in my room at all times. That was until last month. I was sleeping at a friend's house, and I woke up to myself standing in the middle of his room. Then, I feel the same breath and hear the same voice say Sam again in my left ear. I freeze in pure terror, and then it says what will haunt me forever. Sam, why are you shutting me out? That was my breaking point.
I, a 17-year-old boy, broke down crying and had to call my mom to come get me.
I now take my dreamcatcher and no less than 3 spirit animals wherever I am sleeping. P.S. If you've listened to this far, you are awesome, and I would love to hear if anyone has experiences similar to mine. I promise this story is 100% real.